45,000 years ago, our ancestors stood face to face with creatures that could crush them in seconds. Mammoths, cave lions, and woolly rhinos that ruled a frozen world. Yet somehow, armed with nothing but stone-tipped spears and raw courage, they not only survived, but thrived. Tonight we're uncovering the untold story of Ice Age hunting. How did small bands of humans bring down 8-ton giants? What strategies turned desperate survival into systematic success? Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're joining us from tonight. Drop a comment below, and if you enjoy these deep dives into human history, hitting that subscribe button helps more people discover these incredible stories. Let's track our ancestors into the hunt. The sun hangs low on the horizon, casting long blue shadows across an endless expanse of white. This is not the gentle snow of a modern winter. This is the relentless, bone-deep cold of the Upper Paleolithic period 45,000 years ago, when ice sheets sometimes reached thicknesses measured in miles across continents and temperatures in some regions rarely climbed above -20 degrees Fahrenheit. In this harsh world, where the very air seems to crackle with cold, a small band of early humans moved silently across the frozen landscape, their breath forming crystalline clouds that dissipate quickly in the bitter wind. These are the original cavemen, not the crude stereotypes of popular imagination, but sophisticated hunters whose survival depends on skills honed over hundreds of thousands of years. Some are early modern humans who had begun spreading from Africa, while others represent Neanderthals, who had long adapted to European conditions. Each carries a carefully crafted spear tipped with a razor-sharp stone point, the wooden shaft polished smooth by countless hours of use. Their clothing, layered animal hide sewn with sinew and decorated with carved bone ornaments, represents technology that wouldn't be significantly improved upon until the industrial age. The landscape they traverse is both beautiful and terrifying in its emptiness. Vast tundra steppes stretch to the horizon, broken only by occasional stands of stunted birch and pine that somehow manage to survive in this frozen world. The ground beneath their feet is permafrost, soil that has been frozen solid for thousands of years, creating a surface as hard as concrete. Every step must be calculated, every movement deliberate, because in temperatures this extreme, a simple mistake, a twisted ankle, a torn garment, can quickly become a death sentence. But these cavemen are not moving randomly across this desolate expanse. They are following signs invisible to untrained eyes. The faintest depression in the snow where a massive foot pressed down days ago, a few scattered droppings frozen solid as stones, the barely perceptible scent carried on the wind that speaks of prey somewhere ahead. Their quarry is nothing less than the giants of the Ice Age, woolly mammoths weighing up to 12,000 to 16,000 pounds, woolly rhinoceroses armed with horns longer than a man's arm, and herds of reindeer whose migration routes have remained unchanged for millennia. Archaeological evidence from sites like Yana in Arctic Siberia, dating back approximately 30,000 to 32,000 years according to calibrated dates, reveals that these early hunters were already pursuing massive prey in the far north. At this remarkable site, researchers have found ivory tools and mammoth bone fragments with clear signs of human hunting activity, proving that our ancestors were taking down these enormous creatures thousands of years earlier than previously thought. The relationship between predator and prey in this frozen world is unlike anything that exists today. Modern humans hunt with rifles from safe distances, but Ice Age cavemen must get close enough to thrust spears into animals that could crush them with a single step. The margin for error is non-existent. A mammoth's trunk can snap a human spine, its tusks can gore through the thickest hide clothing, and its massive feet can trample a hunter into the frozen ground before he even has time to scream. Yet these same dangerous giants represent survival itself. A single successful mammoth hunt can provide a band of 30 people with enough meat to last through the harshest months of winter. The fat beneath a mammoth's skin, sometimes 6 inches thick, provides the calories necessary to maintain body heat in sub-zero temperatures. The hide becomes shelter material strong enough to withstand Arctic winds. The bones transform into tools, weapons, and even the structural framework for winter dwellings. Archaeological evidence from sites like Kraków-Spadzista in Poland reveals the remarkable sophistication of Ice Age hunting strategies. Here, researchers have uncovered the remains of at least 86 mammoths, clear evidence of systematic hunting around 24,000 years ago. Most remarkably, they found 55 stone implements with characteristic impact damage, interpreted as the flint parts of thrown weapons. These broken spear points remained embedded in mammoth carcasses, while the hunters retrieved their valuable wooden shafts, showing the practical efficiency of these ancient cavemen. The social implications of this kind of hunting cannot be overstated. Unlike modern subsistence hunters, who might work alone or in small groups, Ice Age mammoth hunting required the coordinated effort of entire communities. Scouts had to locate herds and track their movements across hundreds of miles of frozen landscape. Hunters had to coordinate complex strategies that might unfold over days or weeks. Processors had to quickly and efficiently butcher thousands of pounds of meat before scavengers arrived or the meat spoiled in the brief Arctic summer. This necessity for cooperation shaped human society in fundamental ways that echo down to the present day. The planning required for a mammoth hunt demanded leadership structures that could coordinate the efforts of multiple family groups. It required communication systems sophisticated enough to coordinate complex group movements across vast distances. Most importantly, it required methods for resolving conflicts and sharing resources that would later evolve into the basic frameworks of human civilization. Group dynamics also evolved in response to the enormous challenges of Ice Age hunting. Larger groups were safer and more effective, but they also consumed more resources and were harder to coordinate. Smaller groups could move more quickly and hide more effectively, but they lacked the manpower needed to take down the largest prey. The optimal group size, around 25 to 30 individuals, represented a balance between hunting effectiveness and resource sustainability that had life or death implications. The psychological dimension of Ice Age hunting was equally transformative. To face down a creature 10 times your size with only a wooden spear requires a kind of courage that goes beyond simple bravery. It demands absolute confidence in your weapons, your hunting partners, and your own skills. This confidence couldn't be manufactured overnight. It was built through years of training, starting in childhood with small game and gradually working up to the giants of the Ice Age. Children in these hunting societies didn't play with toys. They played with miniature versions of adult tools, learning to throw spears at targets, track animals through snow, and read the subtle signs that meant the difference between a successful hunt and starvation. By adolescence, they were participating in actual hunts, initially as observers and messengers, gradually taking on more dangerous roles as their skills developed. The knowledge required for successful hunting was encyclopedic in scope. Hunters had to understand animal behavior patterns that changed with seasons, weather conditions, and herd dynamics. They needed to know which migration routes different species would take, when and where animals would be most vulnerable, and how various prey species would react to different hunting strategies. They had to be able to read weather patterns days in advance, navigate by stars across featureless landscapes, and coordinate complex group movements without any form of written communication. This knowledge was preserved and transmitted through storytelling traditions that served as both entertainment and education. Around the evening fire, experienced hunters would recount successful hunts in vivid detail, passing on crucial information about animal behavior, hunting techniques, and survival strategies. These stories weren't just memories, they were survival manuals, encoded in narrative form, ensuring that essential knowledge would survive even if individual hunters died. As our band of cavemen continues across the frozen landscape, their eyes constantly scanning for signs of prey, we begin to understand that Ice Age hunting was far more than a simple search for food. It was a complex cultural system that demanded cooperation, courage, and intelligence on a scale that would fundamentally reshape human society and lay the groundwork for everything that followed. In the pale light of dawn, a massive shape emerges from the morning mist like a creature from another world. Standing nearly 11 feet tall at the shoulder and weighing up to 12,000 to 16,000 pounds, the woolly mammoth represents both the ultimate prize and the greatest danger that Ice Age cavemen could encounter. Its curved tusks, extending up to 15 feet in length, can gore through the thickest hide armor, while its trunk, stronger than the arms of 10 men, can lift a grown hunter off his feet and hurl him across the frozen ground with deadly force. But the mammoth is far from the only giant that roams these frozen steppes. The woolly rhinoceros, though smaller at 6,000 pounds, is arguably more dangerous due to its unpredictable temperament and devastating charging speed. Its massive horn, measuring up to 3 feet in length, has been sharpened by countless encounters with predators and rivals. Unlike the relatively docile mammoth, which often ignores approaching hunters until directly threatened, the woolly rhino will charge at the slightest provocation, its poor eyesight making it prone to attacking shadows and sudden movements. Archaeological evidence from sites like Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic reveals that Ice Age cavemen regularly hunted these massive creatures. The remains of dozens of mammoths found at this 30,000-year-old site show clear evidence of systematic butchering, with cut marks on bones indicating that every part of these enormous animals was utilized. Stone tools found embedded in mammoth ribs at sites across Europe prove that our ancestors were actively hunting, not just scavenging, these dangerous giants. The giant bison that thundered across the Ice Age plains were equally formidable prey. Standing 6 feet tall at the shoulder and weighing up to 3,500 pounds, these massive herbivores possessed horns that could span 7 feet from tip to tip. Unlike their smaller modern descendants, Ice Age bison traveled in herds that could number in the thousands, creating stampedes that shook the earth for miles around. The sound of their hooves on frozen ground could be heard long before the animals came into view, warning both predators and prey of their approach. Archaeological sites like Olson Chubbuck in Colorado provide dramatic evidence of how early peoples hunted these massive herds. Here, the remains of nearly 200 giant bison lie in a narrow arroyo, where hunters drove them over a cliff 8,500 years ago. Though this occurred after the glaciers had retreated, similar techniques were likely used during the Ice Age itself. The precision of the kill site, with animals arranged in the exact order they fell, demonstrates the sophisticated planning and execution required for such hunts. Reindeer, though much smaller at 400 pounds, presented their own unique challenges and opportunities. These hardy animals were perhaps the most reliable source of food for northern cavemen, as their predictable migration patterns allowed hunters to plan elaborate seasonal hunts. Reindeer herds could number in the tens of thousands, creating a moving carpet of antlers and bodies that stretched across the horizon. Their annual migrations covered hundreds of miles, following ancient routes that had been established over thousands of years. The timing of reindeer hunts was crucial, as these animals followed strict seasonal schedules dictated by breeding cycles and food availability. Spring hunts targeted pregnant females heavy with fat reserves needed for nursing. Summer hunts focused on bulls whose antlers were in velvet, providing both meat and valuable antler material for tools. Fall hunts were the most critical, as this was when reindeer had accumulated the fat reserves needed to survive winter, making them the most nutritious prey of the year. Cave bears, though technically predators rather than prey, were sometimes hunted by the most skilled cavemen. These massive creatures could weigh up to 1,500 pounds and stood 5 feet tall at the shoulder when on all fours. Their enormous claws, measuring up to 6 inches in length, were capable of disemboweling a human with a single swipe. However, cave bear meat and fat were highly prized, and their thick pelts provided some of the finest winter clothing available to Ice Age peoples. Evidence from sites like Chauvet Cave in France shows that cavemen had complex relationships with cave bears. Some cave paintings depict bears in ways that suggest spiritual reverence, while bear skulls arranged in ritualistic patterns indicate that these animals held special significance beyond their value as food sources. The hunting of cave bears was likely reserved for the most experienced hunters and may have been associated with coming-of-age rituals for young men. Wild horses, ancestors of modern domestic breeds, provided both meat and valuable resources for tool making. These animals, standing about 12 to 13 hands high and weighing around 800 pounds, were fleet-footed and intelligent, making them challenging prey that required sophisticated hunting strategies. Their strong legs provided sinew for binding tools and weapons, while their hides were prized for their durability and water resistance. Archaeological evidence from sites like Solutré in France reveals massive bone deposits containing the remains of tens of thousands of horses killed over centuries of hunting. The sheer scale of these kill sites demonstrates that horse hunting was a major focus of some Ice Age communities, with specialized techniques developed specifically for these swift and elusive animals. The auroch, ancestor of domestic cattle, was perhaps the most dangerous prey regularly hunted by cavemen. These massive bulls could weigh up to 2,200 pounds and stood 6 feet tall at the shoulder, with horns that could span 6 feet across. Unlike the relatively peaceful mammoth, aurochs were naturally aggressive and territorial, prone to charging at anything they perceived as a threat. Their incredible strength and speed made them capable of goring and trampling multiple hunters before they could be brought down. Cave paintings from Lascaux and other sites frequently depict aurochs in hunting scenes, showing these magnificent animals being pursued by groups of hunters armed with spears. The artistic attention given to these creatures in Paleolithic art suggests they held special significance, possibly representing the ultimate test of a hunter's skill and courage. Megaloceros, the giant deer whose antlers could span 12 feet from tip to tip, presented unique challenges due to their impressive defensive equipment. Weighing up to 1,500 pounds, these creatures could use their massive antlers like clubs, sweeping them in wide arcs that could break bones and knock hunters unconscious. The antlers themselves were valuable prizes, providing material for tools, weapons, and ceremonial objects that indicated high status within the tribe. The seasonal behavior of these giant prey animals dictated the rhythm of caveman life in ways that are difficult for modern people to understand. Hunting wasn't simply a matter of going out and finding animals. It required intimate knowledge of migration patterns, breeding cycles, feeding habits, and seasonal vulnerabilities that had been accumulated over thousands of years of observation. Understanding these great prey animals meant understanding the very essence of survival in the Ice Age world. Each species required different hunting strategies, different tools, different levels of cooperation and planning. The mammoth hunt that might feed a tribe for months required entirely different skills than the reindeer hunt that provided regular seasonal sustenance. The dangerous auroch hunt that tested a young hunter's courage bore no resemblance to the patient stalking required for Megaloceros. As the morning mist clears and reveals the true scale of the mammoth ahead, our cavemen hunters begin the complex mental calculations that will determine whether this encounter ends in triumph or tragedy. The great prey of the Ice Age demanded respect, skill, and courage in equal measure, and the hunters who mastered these giants would become the ancestors of all who followed. The hunter's hand closes around the wooden shaft of his spear, feeling the smooth surface that has been polished by countless grips and hours of careful preparation. This is not simply a pointed stick, but a precision instrument that represents thousands of years of technological evolution and the accumulated wisdom of generations of cavemen who faced down the giants of the Ice Age with nothing but stone, wood, and human ingenuity. At the business end of the spear, A carefully napped flint point sits secured with sinew bindings and pine resin. This stone point, no larger than a man's palm, is sharper than any modern steel blade and has been shaped through hours of patient work by a master craftsman who learned his trade over decades of practice. The process of creating such a point begins with the selection of the proper stone. Not just any flint will do, but specific types with the right grain structure and fracture properties. Archaeological evidence from sites like Schöningen in Germany, dating back 300,000 years ago, reveals that early human species possessed sophisticated spear-making technology. The wooden spears found at this site, preserved in ancient lake sediments, show advanced understanding of wood selection, with different parts of the spear crafted from different types of wood to optimize balance, flexibility, and striking power. The napping of stone points required skills that took years to master and represented some of the most sophisticated technology available to Ice Age peoples. A skilled napper could read the internal structure of a piece of flint like a modern engineer reads blueprints, understanding exactly where and how to strike to produce the desired shape. The process required not just technical knowledge, but also an almost artistic sense of how stone would respond to pressure and percussion. The hafting of stone points to wooden shafts was equally complex, requiring understanding of adhesives, binding techniques, and the mechanical stresses that weapons would face during hunting. Sinew from animal tendons provided the strongest available binding material, while pine resin and birch tar served as waterproof adhesives that could hold firm even in the wet conditions of a bloody hunt. The atlatl, or spear thrower, represented a quantum leap in hunting technology that multiplied the force and accuracy of thrown spears. This ingenious device, essentially a stick with a hook on one end, used principles of leverage to dramatically increase the velocity of spears. Archaeological evidence suggests that atlatls first appeared around 30,000 years ago and remained in use until the development of the bow and arrow. Using an atlatl effectively required extensive training and practice. The device essentially lengthened the hunter's arm, allowing him to throw spears with much greater force and accuracy than would be possible with arm strength alone. A skilled atlatl user could drive a spear through the thick hide of a mammoth at distances of 50 yards or more, giving hunters the ability to kill dangerous prey while remaining relatively safe from retaliation. Evidence from sites like Malta in Siberia, dating to 24,000 years ago, shows that Ice Age cavemen were creating remarkably sophisticated projectile weapons. Ivory points found at this site show evidence of complex hafting systems and decorative carving that suggests these weapons had social and spiritual significance beyond their practical function. The bow and arrow, though it appeared later in the hunting timeline, revolutionized the pursuit of smaller, faster prey. Evidence from sites like Stellmoor in Germany provides some of the earliest documentation of bow technology in Europe, dating to around 11,000 years ago. These weapons required different skills and materials than spears, with bow construction demanding understanding of wood flexibility, string tension, and arrow aerodynamics. Arrow points were typically smaller and lighter than spear points, but they required even more precise manufacturing to achieve the balance and sharpness needed for effective hunting. The smallest deviation in weight or shape could cause an arrow to fly erratically, potentially spoiling a hunt and wasting precious resources. The construction of composite tools represented some of the most advanced technology available to cavemen. A typical hunting spear might incorporate wood from 3 different tree species: ash for the main shaft, yew for flexibility near the point, and oak for the butt end that absorbed the shock of throwing. Stone points were often backed with bone or antler pieces that helped distribute stress and prevent breakage. Tool maintenance was a constant concern for Ice Age hunters, as broken weapons in the field could mean death. Every hunter carried a kit of repair materials: extra sinew for binding, small stones for resharpening points, and pine resin for emergency adhesive work. The ability to repair tools quickly and effectively was often more important than the ability to make them from scratch. Specialized hunting tools were developed for different types of prey and hunting situations. Heavy thrusting spears were used for close quarters combat with dangerous animals like cave bears and aurochs. Lighter throwing spears were preferred for hunting from a distance or for pursuing fast-moving prey like horses and reindeer. Harpoons with barbed points were developed for hunting marine mammals and large fish. The social aspects of tool making created some of the first specialized professions in human society. Master knappers who could consistently produce high-quality stone points were valued members of the community whose skills might mean the difference between successful and failed hunts. These craftsmen often worked in dedicated areas of caves or camps, leaving behind massive piles of stone chips that archaeologists still uncover today. Tool-making knowledge was carefully guarded and passed down through apprenticeship systems that could last for years. A young hunter might spend months learning to properly select and prepare wood before being allowed to handle valuable stone or attempt complex hafting procedures. The investment in training was enormous, but the payoff in terms of hunting success was essential for survival. The psychological relationship between hunters and their weapons was deeply personal and often spiritual. Many tools show evidence of decoration, personal markings, or ritualistic treatment that suggests they were viewed as extensions of the hunter's own body and spirit. The loss of a favored weapon could be devastating, both practically and emotionally. Regional variations in tool technology reflected different environmental challenges and available materials. Arctic hunters developed specialized ice picks and snow knives that would have been useless in temperate forests. Woodland hunters created tools optimized for close quarters combat in dense vegetation, while plains hunters focused on long-range projectiles for pursuing game across open spaces. The evolution of hunting tools drove corresponding changes in hunting strategies and social organization. More effective weapons allowed smaller groups to take on larger prey, while the complexity of advanced tools required more specialized knowledge and longer training periods. The arms race between human technology and animal defenses pushed both sides toward greater sophistication and effectiveness. As our caveman hunter checks the binding on his spear point one final time before the hunt begins, we see in his careful attention to detail the same precision and dedication that would eventually create the technologies that built modern civilization. The stone point, gleaming in the morning light, represents not just a tool, but the accumulated wisdom of countless generations who learned that survival depended on the marriage of human intelligence with the raw materials provided by the natural world. The veteran hunter kneels in the snow, his weathered fingers tracing the edge of a massive footprint that stretches nearly 2 feet across. To untrained eyes, it might appear to be just another depression in the white expanse, but to this caveman tracker, the print tells a story as detailed as any written account. The depth of the impression reveals the animal's weight, a fully grown mammoth bull. The way the snow has been pushed up around the edges indicates the direction of travel. Most importantly, the crystalline structure of the ice forming in the track's bottom tells him this print was made less than 6 hours ago. Tracking was perhaps the most crucial skill possessed by Ice Age cavemen, requiring a combination of scientific observation, intuitive understanding, and accumulated knowledge that took decades to master. A skilled tracker could read the landscape like a book, extracting information from the subtlest signs that would be completely invisible to modern eyes. This knowledge was literally a matter of life and death, as the ability to locate prey meant the difference between a fed tribe and a starving one. The great herds of Ice Age animals followed migration patterns that had been established over thousands of years, driven by ancient instincts that responded to seasonal changes, food availability, and breeding cycles. Mammoth herds moved across the steppes in predictable patterns, following routes that led them to seasonal feeding grounds, water sources, and sheltered valleys where they could weather the worst storms. Archaeological evidence from sites like Beringia reveals that these migration routes were so consistent that human settlements were often positioned along known pathways, allowing tribes to intercept herds at predictable times and locations. The Malta Buret culture of Siberia, dating to 24,000 years ago, shows evidence of seasonal camps positioned to take advantage of reindeer migrations that occurred at the same time each year for thousands of years. Reindeer migrations were particularly important to northern cavemen, as these animals moved in massive herds that could number in the hundreds of thousands. The timing of these migrations was tied to seasonal changes so precise that experienced hunters could predict their arrival within days. Spring migrations brought pregnant females heavy with fat, while fall migrations featured animals that had spent the summer building up reserves for winter. The reading of animal tracks required understanding that went far beyond simple identification. A tracker could determine not just what animal had passed, but its age, sex, health status, emotional state, and how recently it had been in the area. The gait pattern revealed whether an animal was walking casually, fleeing from danger, or moving with purpose toward food or water. Mammoth tracks were particularly informative due to their size and the weight of the animals that made them. A deep, well-defined print indicated a healthy adult animal moving slowly and calmly. Shallow, scuffed tracks suggested either a younger animal or one that was moving quickly, possibly in response to danger. The spacing between tracks revealed the animal's stride length and speed, while the angle of the print showed the exact direction of travel. Broken vegetation provided another crucial source of tracking information. Mammoths and other large herbivores left obvious feeding signs wherever they passed, stripping bark from trees, trampling undergrowth, and leaving characteristic bite marks on branches. The height of damaged vegetation indicated the size of the animal, while the freshness of broken branches revealed how recently they had fed in the area. Scent tracking was equally important, though this skill has been almost entirely lost in modern humans. Ice Age cavemen possessed keen senses of smell that allowed them to detect animal odors at distances of several miles, particularly when wind conditions were favorable. Different animals left characteristic scent trails that experienced hunters could follow even when visual tracks were obscured by snow or rocky ground. The analysis of animal droppings provided detailed information about diet, health, and timing that was crucial for successful hunting. Fresh dung indicated recent passage, while the size and content of droppings revealed the animal's species, age, and what it had been eating. This information helped hunters predict where animals might be heading next, as feeding patterns often followed predictable sequences. Behavioral tracking involved understanding the psychological and social patterns of different prey species. Mammoth herds followed matriarchal leadership structures, with older females making decisions about routes and timing. Hunters who understood these dynamics could predict herd movements by observing the behavior of led animals. Seasonal tracking required knowledge of how animal behavior changed throughout the year in response to breeding cycles, food availability, and weather patterns. Spring brought dispersed animals gathering into breeding groups. Summer featured animals spreading out to take advantage of abundant food sources. Fall triggered the formation of large herds preparing for winter migrations. Weather tracking was essential for predicting animal movements in response to changing conditions. Animals could sense approaching storms days before they arrived and would alter their behavior accordingly. Skilled hunters learned to read the same environmental cues, allowing them to anticipate where prey might seek shelter or how they might alter their normal routes. The social aspects of tracking involved the sharing of information between hunters and the coordination of efforts across large areas. Scouts might range dozens of miles from base camps, gathering information about animal movements that would be reported back to hunting leaders. This intelligence network allowed tribes to position themselves for optimal hunting opportunities. Long-distance tracking often required following herds for days or weeks across hundreds of miles of terrain. Hunters developed the endurance and navigational skills necessary to pursue migrating animals across vast distances while maintaining their own survival in harsh conditions. These extended hunts demanded careful planning of food supplies, shelter arrangements, and emergency procedures. The memorization of landscape features was crucial for tracking success, as hunters needed to navigate across featureless terrain while following animal trails. Prominent rocks, unusual tree formations, and distinctive geographical features served as navigation points that allowed trackers to maintain their bearings over long distances. Tracking knowledge was preserved and transmitted through storytelling traditions that encoded complex information in memorable narratives. Stories about legendary hunts often contained detailed information about animal behavior, migration timing, and tracking techniques disguised as entertainment. These oral traditions ensured that crucial survival knowledge would be preserved even if individual trackers died. The relationship between trackers and their prey was often characterized by deep respect and spiritual connection. Many cavemen believed that animals allowed themselves to be hunted by worthy hunters, and that tracking skills were gifts from the animal spirits themselves. This spiritual dimension added meaning and purpose to the difficult and dangerous work of following prey across the frozen landscape. Collaborative tracking involved multiple hunters working together to follow different aspects of an animal's trail. One might focus on footprints while another examined feeding sign, and a third analyzed scent trails. This division of labor allowed for more comprehensive information gathering and reduced the chance of losing a trail due to changing conditions. As our veteran tracker rises from examining the mammoth print and signals to his companions the direction of travel, we see the culmination of knowledge systems that took thousands of years to develop. The ability to read the subtle language of tracks and sign represents one of humanity's first sciences, a systematic approach to understanding the natural world that would eventually evolve into all forms of scientific inquiry. The lead hunter raises his hand, and 20 cavemen freeze instantly in the knee-deep snow, their breath forming small clouds in the frigid air as they wait for his signal. Ahead of them, barely visible through the swirling snow, moves a herd of woolly mammoths, bulls, cows, and calves, numbering perhaps 30 animals, their massive forms dark shadows against the white landscape. This is the moment when weeks of planning, tracking, and careful positioning will either culminate in triumph or disaster. The hunting strategy unfolding here has been refined over thousands of years and passed down through generations of successful hunters. This is not a reckless charge or a desperate gamble, but a carefully orchestrated operation that takes advantage of animal behavior, terrain features, and human cooperation in ways that maximize the chance of success while minimizing the risk of death or injury to the hunters. Persistence hunting represented one of the most sophisticated strategies employed by Ice Age cavemen, taking advantage of human endurance capabilities that surpassed those of most prey animals. While a mammoth could easily outrun a human in a short sprint, these massive creatures could not maintain high speeds over long distances. Human hunters, with their efficient cooling systems and long-distance running adaptations, could pursue prey for hours or even days until exhaustion made the animals vulnerable. Archaeological evidence from sites like the Schöningen spear site in Germany, dating to 300,000 years ago, suggests that even early human species understood the principles of persistence hunting. The spears found at this site were clearly designed for thrusting rather than throwing, indicating close-quarters hunting that would have required running down prey until they could be approached safely. The drive hunting strategy involved coordinating large groups of hunters to funnel prey animals toward natural or artificial killing zones. This technique was particularly effective against herd animals like bison, horses, and reindeer that could be panicked into running in predetermined directions. Famous sites like head-smashed-in Buffalo Jump in North America demonstrate how effective this strategy could be when properly executed. Drive hunts required extensive preparation and precise timing. Hunters had to be positioned at strategic points along the intended route, ready to show themselves at exactly the right moment to keep panicked animals moving in the desired direction. The killing zone itself had to be carefully prepared, often involving the construction of brush barriers or the selection of natural features like cliffs or swamps that would trap fleeing animals. Ambush hunting took advantage of animal behavior patterns and predictable travel routes to position hunters where prey was likely to appear. Water holes, river crossings, and narrow mountain passes were favored ambush sites where animals would be channeled into killing zones with limited escape routes. This strategy required patience and careful observation of animal habits, but could be highly effective against wary prey. The construction of pit traps represented some of the most sophisticated hunting technology available to cavemen. These carefully concealed excavations, sometimes lined with sharpened stakes, could capture large animals alive or wound them sufficiently to make them easy targets for hunters. Archaeological evidence suggests that mammoth pit traps were used by various hunting cultures throughout the Ice Age period. Communal hunting of the largest prey required coordination between multiple family groups and tribes, creating some of the earliest examples of large-scale human cooperation. Mammoth hunts might involve 50 or more hunters working together over periods of weeks to locate, pursue, and kill animals that could feed hundreds of people. These massive undertakings required leadership structures, communication systems, and conflict resolution mechanisms that would later evolve into more complex political organizations. Seasonal hunting strategies took advantage of times when animals were most vulnerable due to breeding behavior, migration stress, or environmental conditions. Spring hunts targeted animals weakened by winter, while fall hunts focused on animals that had accumulated fat reserves but not yet developed their full winter alertness. Breeding season hunts exploited the distraction and exhaustion that came with mating activities. Ice fishing represented a specialized hunting strategy that allowed cavemen to access protein sources during the winter months when terrestrial hunting was most difficult. Archaeological evidence from sites like Dolny Vestonets shows that Ice Age peoples developed sophisticated techniques for fishing through ice, using bone hooks, nets made from plant fibers, and spears designed specifically for underwater use. Scavenging strategies allowed hunters to take advantage of natural deaths or kills made by large predators. Following wolf packs or cave lions could lead hunters to fresh carcasses that could be claimed once the primary predators had finished feeding. This strategy required understanding predator behavior and the courage to compete with dangerous carnivores for access to meat. Fire hunting involved the controlled use of flames to manipulate animal behavior and funnel prey toward waiting hunters. Grass fires could be used to drive animals out of cover or toward predetermined locations, while torch-bearing hunters could panic night-feeding animals into running toward hidden spears. This strategy was particularly effective in open grassland environments, where fires could be controlled and directed. Relay hunting utilized multiple teams of hunters positioned along known migration routes to pursue exhausted animals as they fled from one group to another. This strategy was particularly effective against fast-moving prey like horses and reindeer that could easily outrun individual hunters, but could be worn down by successive waves of pursuit. Specialized tools and techniques were developed for hunting in different environments and conditions. Winter hunting required ice picks, snowshoes, and specialized shelters that could be quickly erected in hostile conditions. Forest hunting demanded different skills and tools than open plains hunting, with emphasis on stealth and close-quarters combat rather than long-distance pursuit. The psychological aspects of hunting strategies involved understanding animal behavior under stress and exploiting natural fears and instincts. Many prey animals could be manipulated by hunters who understood their flight responses and herd dynamics. Skilled hunters could predict how animals would react to threats and position themselves to take advantage of predictable behaviors. Group communication during hunts relied on sophisticated systems of hand signals, calls, and predetermined movements that allowed coordination without alerting prey animals. These communication systems had to work effectively over long distances and in poor visibility conditions, requiring practice and standardization that could only be achieved through extensive training. Risk management was a crucial component of all hunting strategies, as the death or injury of hunters could doom entire tribes to starvation. Hunting plans always included contingencies for injured hunters, escape routes if hunts went wrong, and backup strategies if primary approaches failed. The most successful hunting groups were those that balanced aggression with caution. Technological integration involved combining multiple tools and techniques to create hunting systems that were more effective than any individual component. A typical mammoth hunt might involve tracking, fire, pit traps, spears, and coordinated group movements all working together to bring down prey that would be impossible to kill using any single approach. As the lead hunter finally gives the signal and 20 cavemen begin their carefully coordinated approach to the mammoth herd, we witness the culmination of strategic thinking that required intelligence, cooperation, and courage in equal measure. The hunting strategies developed by Ice Age peoples represented some of humanity's first systematic approaches to problem solving, creating the foundation for all subsequent technological and social developments. The circle of hunters tightens around the wounded mammoth bull, their spears held ready as the massive creature trumpets its rage and pain into the cold morning air. Each man knows his exact position and role in this deadly dance, the veterans with their heavy thrusting spears positioned to deliver killing blows, younger hunters with lighter weapons ready to dart in and retreat, scouts watching the surrounding area for other mammoths or predators drawn by the commotion. This is cooperation at its most primal and essential level, where a single mistake by any individual could doom them all. Cooperative hunting among Ice Age cavemen represented far more than simple teamwork. It was a complete social system that required levels of trust, communication, and coordination that fundamentally changed human nature. Unlike most other predators who hunted alone or in small family groups, humans developed the ability to coordinate the actions of dozens of individuals in pursuit of prey that no single hunter could hope to kill. Archaeological evidence from sites like Box Grove in England, dating to 500,000 years ago, shows that even early human species were engaging in coordinated group hunts that required planning and role specialization. The remains of horses and other large animals found at this site show butchering patterns that indicate multiple hunters working together to process carcasses too large for individual consumption. The leadership structures that emerged from cooperative hunting created some of humanity's first formal hierarchies and decision-making systems. Hunt leaders were typically older, experienced hunters who had demonstrated their ability to read animal behavior, coordinate group movements, and make life or death decisions under pressure. These leaders held authority that extended beyond individual hunts, often becoming tribal elders whose wisdom guided broader community decisions. Communication during cooperative hunts required the development of sophisticated signaling systems that could convey complex information quickly and silently. Hand signals allowed hunters to coordinate movements without alerting prey animals, while specific calls and whistles could convey urgent information about changing conditions or immediate dangers. These communication systems were among humanity's first standardized languages. Role specialization during hunts created the foundations for more complex social structures that would eventually evolve into professional specializations. The fastest runners became scouts and messengers. The strongest became spear throwers and close combat specialists. The most observant became trackers and strategists. These roles were not temporary assignments, but lifelong specializations that determined an individual's position within the tribe. Training systems for cooperative hunting required years of practice and gradual advancement through increasingly responsible roles. Young boys began as observers and message carriers, learning to read the subtle signs and signals that coordinated group actions. As they demonstrated competence and courage, they advanced to more dangerous positions, eventually earning the right to participate in the final kill. Trust formation was essential for successful cooperative hunting, as each hunter had to rely completely on his companions to fulfill their assigned roles. A tracker who led the group to prey had to trust that the other hunters would be in position when needed. Spear throwers had to trust that their companions would support them if animals charged. This level of trust could only be built through repeated successful cooperation over many years. The sharing protocols that governed meat distribution after successful hunts created some of humanity's first formal systems of resource allocation and social justice. Complex rules determined how much meat each participant received based on their role in the hunt, their position in the tribal hierarchy, and their family's needs. These sharing systems prevented conflicts and ensured that successful hunts benefited entire communities. Conflict resolution mechanisms were essential for maintaining group cohesion when disputes arose over hunting decisions, role assignments, or meat distribution. Successful hunting groups developed formal procedures for settling disagreements that prevented internal conflicts from destroying the cooperation necessary for survival. These early justice systems laid the groundwork for more complex legal and political institutions. Group psychology during hunting created intense bonds between participants that extended far beyond the immediate activity. The shared danger, mutual dependence, and common purpose of hunting forged emotional connections that anthropologists still observe in traditional hunting societies today. These bonds created the social glue that held tribes together through good times and bad. Tactical coordination during the actual hunt required split-second timing and absolute precision in executing predetermined plans. A typical mammoth hunt might involve multiple phases: locating and approaching the herd, separating individual animals, driving them toward killing zones, and delivering coordinated attacks. Each phase required different skills and precise coordination between hunters in different positions. Information sharing before and after hunts allowed groups to continuously improve their techniques and learn from both successes and failures. Experienced hunters would pass on knowledge about animal behavior, terrain features, and tactical innovations to younger members. Failed hunts were carefully analyzed to identify mistakes and develop better approaches for future attempts. Territory management became necessary as hunting groups needed to coordinate their activities across large areas without interfering with each other's efforts. Informal agreements developed between neighboring tribes about hunting territories, seasonal access rights, and protocols for sharing information about animal movements. These agreements represented some of humanity's first international diplomacy. Technological cooperation involved hunters pooling their specialized tools and skills to create hunting systems more effective than any individual could achieve alone. One hunter might provide the best spear points, another the finest wooden shafts, a third the strongest sinew for bindings. This cooperation in tool-making created interdependencies that strengthened social bonds. Risk distribution was a crucial benefit of cooperative hunting, as shared dangers were more manageable than individual risks. If one hunter was injured, others could continue the hunt and care for the wounded. If weapons broke, others could share their tools. If individuals made mistakes, the group could compensate and adapt. This risk-sharing made hunting safer and more reliable than individual efforts. Seasonal coordination allowed hunting groups to take advantage of different opportunities throughout the year by organizing their activities around animal migration patterns, breeding cycles, and environmental conditions. Large communal hunts were typically scheduled for times when multiple family groups could come together, while smaller cooperative efforts continued throughout the year. Cultural transmission of hunting knowledge was enhanced by cooperative activities that brought together hunters of different ages and experience levels. Young hunters learned not just individual skills, but the complex social and tactical knowledge needed for group coordination. This transmission system ensured that cooperative hunting techniques improved over generations. Innovation and adaptation occurred more rapidly in cooperative hunting groups because multiple individuals could contribute ideas and experiment with new approaches. A tactical innovation developed by one hunter could be quickly adopted and refined by others, leading to continuous improvement in hunting effectiveness. This collective innovation process accelerated human technological and social development. Symbolic and ritual aspects of cooperative hunting created shared meaning and purpose that strengthened group identity and commitment. Pre-hunt ceremonies brought participants together in common purpose, while post-hunt celebrations reinforced the bonds created by shared success. These rituals transformed practical cooperation into cultural identity. As the wounded mammoth finally falls under the coordinated assault of 20 hunters, each having played his precise role in a plan years in the making, we witness the power of human cooperation that would eventually enable our species to dominate the planet. The ability to subordinate individual interests to group goals, to trust completely in the competence and commitment of others, and to coordinate complex activities across time and space represented evolutionary adaptations that distinguished humans from all other species and laid the foundation for civilization itself. The massive bull mammoth stands 15 yards away, his breath creating clouds of steam in the bitter cold as he swings his enormous head back and forth, trying to locate the source of the strange sounds and scents that have disturbed his peaceful morning feeding. At 12 feet tall and weighing nearly 14,000 pounds, he represents both the greatest prize and the most dangerous adversary that any caveman hunter will ever face. His tusks, curved like enormous scimitars and measuring 14 feet in length, can impale a man with a casual toss of his massive head. His trunk, stronger than the combined arms of 6 hunters, can crush bones with a squeeze or hurl a grown man 30 feet through the air. But the 25 cavemen who have spent 3 weeks tracking this particular bull are not here by accident or impulse. They have studied this animal's habits, learned his feeding patterns, and waited for the perfect moment when he separated himself from the protective herd to forage alone in this narrow valley. Every man knows his role in the deadly choreography about to unfold, and each has trained for years to reach this moment when human intelligence would be pitted against raw animal power. Archaeological evidence from sites like Lugovskoye in Siberia provides dramatic proof that mammoth hunting was not just possible, but regularly practiced by Ice Age cavemen. At this 13,500-year-old site, researchers found a mammoth vertebra with a quartzite spear point embedded directly in the bone, providing unambiguous evidence that humans were actively hunting these massive creatures. The absence of healing around the wound indicates that the spear strike was immediately fatal, demonstrating the effectiveness of caveman hunting techniques. The approach phase of a mammoth hunt required extraordinary patience and skill, as these intelligent animals possessed keen senses of smell and hearing that could detect approaching danger from great distances. Hunters had to approach from downwind, moving slowly and carefully to avoid creating sounds that might alert their quarry. The thick hair covering a mammoth's body provided excellent camouflage, making it difficult to see vital areas. But experienced hunters knew to look for the thin skin behind the ears and the vulnerable spots where the legs joined the massive body. Mammoth behavior during confrontations was well understood by experienced hunters who had observed these animals for generations. When threatened, a bull mammoth would typically rear up on his hind legs, using his height and weight to intimidate attackers, while positioning his tusks for maximum defensive effect. However, this behavior also exposed the relatively unprotected belly area, creating opportunities for skilled hunters with long spears to strike vital organs. The weapon systems used for mammoth hunting were specifically designed for penetrating the thick hide and massive muscle mass of these enormous animals. Spear points had to be longer and heavier than those used for smaller prey, often measuring 6 inches or more in length and crafted from the finest available flint or obsidian. The wooden shafts were correspondingly robust, made from the strongest available hardwoods and reinforced with bone or antler backing to prevent breakage under the enormous stresses of mammoth hunting. Recent research suggests that many mammoth hunts employed planted pike techniques rather than thrown spears. In this method, hunters would brace the butt end of their spears against the ground and angle the points upward, allowing the mammoth's own charging momentum to drive the spear deeper into its body. This technique, similar to methods used against cavalry in later warfare, could deliver wounds far more devastating than any human could inflict through throwing or thrusting alone. The coordination required for a successful mammoth hunt involved multiple teams of hunters working in carefully timed sequence. Scout teams would locate and track potential targets. Approach teams would get into position for the initial attack, and support teams would be ready to assist with wounded animals or rescue hunters who found themselves in immediate danger. This level of coordination required leadership skills and communication systems that represented some of humanity's most sophisticated social achievements. Wound placement was crucial for bringing down an animal as massive as a mammoth, as superficial injuries would only serve to enrage the creature and make it more dangerous. Hunters aimed for specific vulnerable areas: the heart and lungs behind the front legs, the major arteries in the neck, or the spine at the base of the skull. Knowledge of mammoth anatomy was passed down through generations of hunters who had dissected countless carcasses and learned exactly where to strike for maximum effect. The dangers of mammoth hunting were enormous and well documented in the archaeological record. Human remains from Ice Age sites frequently show evidence of traumatic injuries consistent with mammoth attacks: crushed skulls, broken ribs, and shattered limb bones that tell the story of hunts gone wrong. The decision to attempt a mammoth hunt was never taken lightly, as the death or severe injury of multiple hunters could doom an entire tribe to starvation. Blood loss and shock were the primary mechanisms by which mammoth hunts succeeded, as even the most perfectly placed spear strike was unlikely to kill such a massive animal instantly. Hunters had to maintain pressure on wounded animals while avoiding their increasingly desperate and dangerous defensive actions. This phase of the hunt often lasted for hours and required exceptional courage and endurance from all participants. The use of fire in mammoth hunting provided both tactical advantages and additional dangers. Torches could be used to confuse and panic animals, making them more likely to blunder into prepared positions or natural obstacles. However, fire also created visibility that could alert other mammoths to the danger, potentially bringing an entire herd to the aid of the hunted animal. The decision to use fire was a calculated risk that required careful consideration of wind conditions and terrain features. Backup strategies were essential for mammoth hunts because these animals were too dangerous and valuable to approach without multiple contingency plans. If the initial attack failed, hunters needed predetermined escape routes and rally points where they could regroup for another attempt. If weapons broke or hunters were injured, replacement equipment and rescue procedures had to be immediately available. The butchering of a successful mammoth kill represented an enormous logistical challenge that required additional planning and coordination. 14,000 pounds of meat, fat, hide, and bone had to be processed quickly before scavengers arrived or the meat spoiled. This work required specialized tools, organized work teams, and predetermined systems for dividing and preserving the enormous bounty that a single mammoth could provide. Trophy taking from mammoth hunts served both practical and spiritual purposes. The massive tusks were valuable as raw material for tools, weapons, and artistic objects, but they also served as proof of the hunter's courage and skill. Archaeological sites across Europe and Asia contain carved mammoth ivory objects that demonstrate the high status accorded to successful mammoth hunters. Weather considerations played a crucial role in mammoth hunting, as these animals were more vulnerable during certain atmospheric conditions. Cold, windy weather could mask the approach of hunters while reducing the mammoth's ability to detect danger through scent. However, extreme cold also made it more difficult for hunters to maintain the dexterity and endurance needed for a successful hunt. The seasonal timing of mammoth hunts was critical, as these animals were most vulnerable during specific times of year when their behavior patterns made them easier to approach and isolate. Late fall hunts targeted animals that had accumulated maximum fat reserves but had not yet developed their full winter alertness. Spring hunts focused on animals weakened by winter but not yet fully recovered their strength. Geographic factors influenced mammoth hunting strategies, as different terrain types offered different advantages and challenges. Valley hunts allowed hunters to use natural barriers to contain wounded animals, while open plain hunts required different tactics based on visibility and escape routes. River crossings and bog areas were favored hunting sites where mammoth mobility would be restricted. As the great bull finally charges toward the line of hunters with their planted spears, the culmination of weeks of planning and years of training reaches its climactic moment. The thundering footsteps shake the frozen ground as 14,000 pounds of enraged mammoth bears down on 25 cavemen armed with nothing but stone-tipped wooden spears and generations of accumulated hunting wisdom. In this moment, we witness the supreme test of human courage, intelligence, and cooperation that enabled our ancestors to bring down the mightiest creatures that ever walked the earth. The cave lion's roar echoes off the stone walls like thunder, a sound that freezes the blood and awakens every primal fear buried deep in human DNA. Standing 4 feet tall at the shoulder and weighing 700 pounds, this massive predator is larger than any big cat alive today, armed with canine teeth that measure 4 inches in length and claws capable of disemboweling a man with a single swipe. But for the 5 cavemen who have cornered this beast in its own den, this is not just a terrifying encounter, it is a necessary hunt that will determine whether their families survive the coming winter. Unlike the hunting of herbivorous prey, which was primarily about obtaining food, the hunting of dangerous predators served multiple crucial purposes for Ice Age cavemen. Cave lions, dire wolves, cave bears, and other large carnivores competed directly with humans for shelter, prey animals, and territory. A single cave lion could kill and eat several humans before being driven off, while a pack of dire wolves could wipe out an entire family group in a coordinated nighttime attack. Archaeological evidence from sites like Schöningen in Germany shows that early human species were hunting dangerous predators as far back as 300,000 years ago. Wooden spears found at this site show modifications specifically designed for close-quarters combat with large carnivores. Heavier points, reinforced shafts, and shorter overall length for better maneuverability in confined spaces like caves and dense forests. Cave lions represented perhaps the most dangerous predators regularly hunted by Ice Age cavemen. These massive cats were ambush predators that preferred to attack from concealment, using their enormous strength to break the necks of prey animals with a single bite. Their intelligence and hunting experience made them formidable opponents that could anticipate human tactics and adapt their behavior accordingly. The territorial nature of cave lions made conflict with humans inevitable, as both species preferred the same types of sheltered locations for their homes. Caves that provided protection from weather and other predators were valuable real estate that both lions and humans would fight to control. Archaeological evidence from caves across Europe shows layers of human and lion occupation alternating over thousands of years as control changed hands. Dire wolves hunting required different strategies than those used against solitary predators, as these animals operated in coordinated packs that could number 30 or more individuals. A dire wolf pack could surround and overwhelm human hunters using tactics similar to those employed by humans themselves. The key to successful dire wolf hunting was disrupting their coordination and isolating individual animals where human weapons could be effective. The weapons used for predator hunting were necessarily different from those designed for herbivore hunting. Shorter, heavier spears allowed for better control in close quarters combat, while broader spear points created larger wounds that would incapacitate dangerous animals more quickly. Some spears were equipped with crossguards, horizontal bars behind the point that prevented wounded predators from sliding up the shaft to attack the hunter. Fire played a crucial role in predator hunting, serving both as a weapon and as a tool for tactical advantage. Most large carnivores had an instinctive fear of flames that could be exploited by hunters carrying torches or firebrands. Fire could be used to drive predators out of caves, confuse them during attacks, or create barriers that channeled their movements into predetermined killing zones. Cave bear hunting was particularly dangerous because these massive animals, weighing up to 1,500 pounds, were not only powerful but also highly intelligent. Cave bears could use tools, solve complex problems, and remember the locations of previous encounters with humans. They were also excellent climbers and swimmers, making escape difficult once an encounter began. The timing of predator hunts was often determined by necessity rather than choice, as dangerous animals posed immediate threats that had to be addressed regardless of conditions. A cave lion that had taken up residence near a tribal camp could not be ignored until a more convenient time. However, experienced hunters preferred to attack predators during daylight hours when human vision provided advantages over nocturnal hunters. Group tactics for predator hunting emphasized containment and overwhelming force rather than the patience and precision used for herbivore hunting. Predators were too dangerous to allow extended encounters, so hunts had to be concluded quickly and decisively. This required larger numbers of hunters and more aggressive tactics that accepted higher risks in exchange for faster resolution. The psychological aspects of predator hunting were completely different from other types of hunting. While herbivore hunting required patience and stealth, predator hunting demanded the ability to function effectively while experiencing extreme fear and adrenaline. The sounds, smells, and movements of large carnivores triggered intense fight-or-flight responses that could paralyze inexperienced hunters. Training for predator hunting began early and focused heavily on overcoming natural fear responses. Young hunters were gradually exposed to increasingly dangerous situations, starting with the tracks and scent of predators, progressing to encounters with smaller carnivores, and eventually participating in hunts against the largest and most dangerous animals. Defensive hunting became necessary when predators began actively stalking human settlements or attacking tribal members. These hunts were not optional, but represented essential survival activities that could not be postponed or avoided. The failure to eliminate dangerous predators could result in the complete destruction of human communities. Scavenging opportunities sometimes arose when large predators were found dead or dying from natural causes, injuries, or diseases. However, approaching dead predators was extremely dangerous, as they might only be wounded or could attract other carnivores to the area. Scavenged predator materials were valuable, but required careful assessment of risks versus benefits. Trophy collection from predator hunts served important social and spiritual functions beyond the practical value of teeth, claws, and hides. Successfully hunting a cave lion or cave bear marked a hunter as exceptionally brave and skilled, earning respect and status within the tribe. These trophies also served as proof of the elimination of specific threats to community safety. The use of traps and snares in predator hunting allowed humans to kill dangerous animals without direct confrontation. Pit traps could be concealed along predator travel routes, while snares made from plant fibers or sinew could strangle smaller carnivores. However, wounded predators caught in traps were extremely dangerous and required careful approaches for final killing. Seasonal variations in predator hunting reflected changes in animal behavior and human vulnerability. Winter predator hunts were particularly dangerous because snow conditions could favor either predators or humans, depending on depth and crusting. Spring hunts targeted predators weakened by winter, but also dealt with animals made more aggressive by mating behaviors. The cooperative aspects of predator hunting created some of the strongest bonds within hunting groups, as shared danger and mutual dependence forged relationships that extended far beyond individual hunts. Hunters who had faced down cave lions together developed trust and loyalty that influenced tribal politics and social structures for generations. Medical knowledge related to predator attacks became essential survival information, as wounds from large carnivores were often severe and required immediate treatment. Hunters learned to treat deep puncture wounds, massive lacerations, and crushing injuries using plant medicines, bone-setting techniques, and primitive surgical procedures. The spiritual significance of predator hunting influenced religious and mythological systems that portrayed successful hunters as heroes blessed by supernatural powers. Many cave paintings and carved artifacts depict humans in combat with large predators, suggesting that these encounters held meaning that went far beyond simple survival necessity. As the cornered cave lion gathers itself for a final desperate charge at the 5 cavemen blocking its escape route, we witness the ultimate test of human courage and determination. In this moment, with death only seconds away from either the hunters or their massive adversary, we see the kind of bravery that enabled our ancestors to claim dominance over predators that had ruled the earth for millions of years. The mammoth bull lies motionless in the trampled snow, his massive body steaming in the frigid air as blood pools beneath his head where the final spear thrust found its mark. But for the exhausted hunters who brought down this 7-ton giant, the real work is just beginning. What lies before them is not just a dead animal, but 14,000 pounds of meat, fat, hide, and bone that must be processed, divided, and preserved before scavengers arrive or the precious resources spoil in the brief Arctic warmth. The lead hunter approaches the massive carcass carefully, his stone knife already in hand, knowing that the next few hours will determine whether this hunt becomes a triumph that feeds the tribe for months or a tragic waste of life and effort. Every cut must be precise. Every decision about processing and distribution must balance practical necessity with social obligations that have been refined over thousands of years of communal survival. Archaeological evidence from butchering sites across Ice Age Europe reveals the sophisticated techniques that cavemen developed for processing massive carcasses. At sites like Kraków Spadzista in Poland, researchers have found mammoth bones with specific cut marks that indicate systematic dismemberment following predetermined patterns designed to maximize meat recovery while preserving valuable materials for tools and shelter. The initial approach to a freshly killed mammoth required extreme caution, as even dead animals this size could be dangerous. The massive weight could shift unexpectedly, crushing anyone caught underneath, while the sharp tusks remained hazardous obstacles that had to be carefully navigated. Experienced butchers always checked for signs of life before beginning the cutting process, as wounded animals had been known to revive during processing with deadly consequences. Skinning represented the first critical step in mammoth processing, requiring specialized tools and techniques developed specifically for animals with hides up to 2 inches thick. The process began with careful incisions around the legs and neck, followed by systematic peeling of the hide using curved stone scrapers and sharp flint knives. The mammoth's thick winter coat had to be preserved intact to serve as insulation material for clothing and shelter construction. The division of labor during butchering followed strict protocols that had been established through generations of successful hunts. The most experienced hunters handled the initial skinning and identification of major muscle groups, while younger members were assigned to tasks like bone marrow extraction and organ removal. Women and older children often took responsibility for processing smaller cuts and preparing materials for preservation. Tool specialization for butchering included implements designed for specific aspects of carcass processing. Heavy choppers made from mammoth leg bones could break through joints and separate major body sections. Sharp flint knives with carefully shaped edges could slice through hide and muscle with surgical precision. Curved scrapers removed meat from bones and cleaned hides for leather production. The systematic dismemberment of a mammoth followed anatomical knowledge that had been accumulated over thousands of years of hunting and butchering experience. Hunters knew exactly where to cut to separate limbs at the joints, how to remove major muscle groups intact, and which organs should be processed first to prevent spoilage. This knowledge was passed down through apprenticeship systems that ensured crucial skills would survive even if individual experts died. Meat preservation techniques were essential for maximizing the value of a mammoth kill, as 14,000 pounds of meat could not be consumed fresh by even the largest tribal groups. Thin strips of muscle were cut and hung on wooden racks to dry in the cold air, creating jerky that could last for months. Fat was rendered over fires and stored in animal bladders or stomach pouches, providing concentrated calories for the lean winter months. The extraction of bone marrow required specialized techniques using stone hammers and anvils to crack open the massive bones without destroying the nutritious contents. Mammoth leg bones could yield several pounds of marrow, which was eaten fresh as a delicacy, or mixed with rendered fat to create high-energy food bars similar to modern pemmican. Organ processing demanded immediate attention, as these nutrient-rich parts spoiled quickly, even in cold conditions. The liver, heart, and kidneys were typically consumed fresh during butchering, providing essential vitamins and minerals that were difficult to obtain from other sources during winter months. The stomach and intestines were cleaned and prepared for use as storage containers and tool-making materials. Blood collection was another crucial aspect of mammoth processing, as this protein-rich fluid could be consumed fresh, used as a binding agent for preserved foods, or allowed to freeze into blocks for later consumption. Large containers made from animal skins were used to collect blood as it drained from the carcass during butchering. The sharing protocols that governed meat distribution reflected complex social hierarchies and obligations within Ice Age tribal groups. The hunters who had taken the greatest risks during the kill received choice portions, but the needs of children, pregnant women, and elderly members were also carefully considered. These sharing systems prevented conflicts and ensured that successful hunts benefited entire communities rather than just individual hunters. Quality control during butchering required constant vigilance for signs of disease or contamination that could make meat dangerous to consume. Experienced butchers could recognize diseased organs, parasitic infections, and other conditions that required careful handling or disposal of affected portions. This knowledge was literally a matter of life and death for communities that depended on meat for survival. Waste minimization was a crucial aspect of mammoth butchering, as every part of the animal had potential value for survival. Bones became tools, weapons, and construction materials. Hide provided clothing and shelter materials. Even hooves and hair had uses in tool making and textile production. Nothing was discarded unless it was genuinely useless or dangerous. Storage systems for processed mammoth materials required sophisticated understanding of preservation techniques and environmental conditions. Underground caches lined with stones kept frozen meat fresh for extended periods. Above-ground platforms protected materials from ground moisture while allowing air circulation for drying. These storage systems were often located at distances from living areas to prevent attracting scavengers. The timing of butchering activities was critical for maximizing the value of mammoth kills while minimizing risks from scavengers and spoilage. Work typically began immediately after the kill and continued without interruption until all valuable materials had been processed and secured. This often meant working through the night by firelight to complete the enormous task. Scavenger management during butchering required constant vigilance and defensive measures, as the smell of blood and fresh meat attracted wolves, bears, and other dangerous predators. Guards were posted around the butchering site while work continued, and fires were maintained to discourage approaching scavengers. In extreme cases, valuable meat had to be abandoned if predator pressure became too intense. Tool maintenance during extended butchering sessions was essential, as the enormous workload quickly dulled cutting edges and broke handles. Portable tool repair kits included replacement handles, binding materials, and sharpening stones that allowed work to continue without interruption. The failure of critical tools during butchering could result in significant losses of valuable materials. Weather considerations affected all aspects of mammoth butchering, as temperature, wind, and precipitation could dramatically impact preservation and working conditions. Cold weather helped preserve meat, but made cutting more difficult and dangerous. Wind could accelerate drying, but also spread scent that attracted predators. Snow and rain complicated working conditions while potentially contaminating processed materials. The social aspects of communal butchering created opportunities for sharing knowledge, strengthening relationships, and resolving conflicts within tribal groups. The cooperative nature of processing massive carcasses required individuals to work closely together over extended periods, fostering communication and mutual understanding that enhanced group cohesion. As the last strips of mammoth meat are hung on drying racks and the massive bones are sorted for tool making, the successful completion of this butchering operation represents far more than simple food processing. It demonstrates the sophisticated knowledge, social cooperation, and technical skills that enabled Ice Age cavemen to transform dangerous hunting into sustainable survival systems that supported entire communities through the harshest conditions on Earth. The cave glows with the warm orange light of a carefully tended fire, its flames dancing across stone walls blackened by thousands of years of smoke as the sweet aroma of roasting mammoth meat fills the air. Around the central hearth, families of cavemen gather with stone tools and wooden bowls, preparing to share the bounty of yesterday's successful hunt. But this is far more than simple cooking. It is a complex transformation process that will convert raw mammoth flesh into the concentrated calories and essential nutrients needed to survive another brutal Ice Age winter. The mastery of fire for food preparation represented one of humanity's most revolutionary technological achievements, fundamentally changing human biology, social structure, and survival capabilities. Archaeological evidence from sites like Kisum Cave in Israel, dating back 400,000 years, shows that controlled use of fire for cooking was already well established among early human species, suggesting that this technology was crucial for human evolution and expansion into harsh environments. Roasting techniques developed by Ice Age cavemen were far more sophisticated than simple exposure of meat to flame. The construction of specialized roasting pits involved digging shallow depressions lined with flat stones that could retain and distribute heat evenly. Large cuts of mammoth meat were suspended over these heated stones using wooden frames, allowing for slow, controlled cooking that preserved maximum nutritional value while creating the concentrated calories essential for cold weather survival. The selection of cooking fuels required detailed knowledge of how different materials affected food flavor, cooking speed, and smoke production. Hardwoods like oak and maple provided steady, long-burning fires perfect for extended roasting sessions, while aromatic woods like apple and cherry added distinctive flavors to cooked meat. Bone fragments from previous meals served as excellent fuel that burned hot and clean, while dried animal dung provided reliable heat in treeless environments. Boiling techniques using heated stones represented an advanced cooking technology that allowed cavemen to extract maximum nutrition from bones, organs, and tough cuts of meat. Watertight containers made from animal stomachs or carefully sewn hides could be filled with water and chunks of mammoth meat, then heated by dropping red-hot stones into the liquid. This method created nutrient-rich broths that provided essential vitamins and minerals difficult to obtain from roasted meat alone. The rendering of animal fat was a crucial food preparation technique that provided concentrated calories essential for surviving extreme cold. Mammoth fat, cut into small pieces and slowly heated over controlled fires, yielded gallons of rendered oil that could be stored in animal bladders for extended periods. This fat provided more than twice the calories per pound of muscle meat and was essential for maintaining body heat during the coldest months. Smoking techniques for meat preservation combined cooking with long-term food storage, creating supplies that could sustain tribes through extended periods when hunting was impossible. Wooden racks constructed over smoldering fires allowed thin strips of mammoth meat to be slowly dried and flavored with smoke from specific woods that provided antimicrobial compounds. Properly smoked meat could remain edible for months without refrigeration. The preparation of bone marrow required specialized heating techniques that softened the tough bone material while preserving the nutritious interior content. Mammoth leg bones were carefully cracked using stone hammers, then heated in fires until the marrow could be easily extracted. This nutrient-dense food provided essential fatty acids and minerals that were particularly important for brain development in children. Cooking temperature control was achieved through careful fire management and the strategic placement of food items at different distances from heat sources. Experienced cooks could judge proper cooking temperatures by observing flame color, smoke characteristics, and the behavior of fat dripping from roasting meat. This knowledge allowed for precise control over cooking processes that maximized nutrition while preventing dangerous undercooking or wasteful overcooking. The social aspects of communal cooking created opportunities for strengthening tribal bonds and sharing knowledge between generations. Cooking fires served as gathering places where families came together to share food, exchange information, and participate in the social activities that held communities together. Children learned essential survival skills by observing and participating in food preparation activities. Nutritional knowledge among Ice Age cavemen was surprisingly sophisticated, reflecting thousands of years of observation and experimentation with different foods and cooking methods. Hunters understood which parts of animals provided the most concentrated nutrition, which cooking methods preserved essential nutrients, and how to combine different foods to create balanced diets that supported health and survival. The timing of cooking activities was carefully coordinated with hunting schedules and weather conditions to maximize efficiency and minimize waste. Large communal cooking sessions typically followed successful mammoth hunts when massive amounts of meat needed to be processed quickly. Individual family cooking continued throughout the winter using preserved foods and smaller game animals. Tool specialization for cooking included implements designed specifically for food preparation and serving, sharp knives for cutting meat, curved scrapers for removing fat, wooden ladles for serving liquids, and stone bowls for holding food, all represented specialized technologies that enhanced cooking efficiency and food safety. Seasoning and flavoring techniques used natural plant materials to enhance the taste and digestibility of cooked foods. Wild herbs, dried berries, and aromatic roots were added to cooking fires or mixed directly with food to provide variety in otherwise monotonous winter diets. Some plants also provided medicinal benefits that supported health during stressful periods. Food safety knowledge was essential for preventing illness from contaminated or improperly cooked food. Experienced cooks could recognize signs of spoilage, understood proper cooking temperatures for different types of meat, and knew which plant materials were safe to consume. This knowledge was particularly crucial when dealing with organs and other perishable parts of large animals. Storage techniques for cooked foods allowed tribes to prepare large quantities during favorable conditions and preserve them for later consumption. Cooked meat could be dried and stored in waterproof containers, while rendered fat could be poured into animal bladders and stored in cool, dry locations. These preservation methods extended the useful life of hunting success over extended periods. The integration of cooking with other survival activities created efficient systems that maximized the value of time and energy investments. Cooking fires also provided warmth, light for evening activities, and protection from predators. The ashes from cooking fires fertilized areas around camps, encouraging the growth of useful plants. Water procurement and treatment were essential components of cooking activities, as clean water was needed for boiling and cleaning. Ice and snow had to be melted and filtered through sand or plant materials to remove impurities. Natural springs were valued not just for their convenience, but also for their reliability and quality. Cooking techniques adapted to available materials and environmental conditions, demonstrating the flexibility and innovation that characterized Ice Age survival strategies. When fuel was scarce, cooks developed methods for concentrating heat and minimizing waste. When containers were limited, food was prepared using techniques that required minimal equipment. The medicinal aspects of food preparation included cooking methods that enhanced the therapeutic properties of certain foods or neutralized potentially harmful substances. Specific cooking techniques could concentrate beneficial compounds, break down difficult-to-digest proteins, or eliminate parasites and bacteria that might cause illness. Seasonal variations in cooking reflected changes in available foods, fuel supplies, and environmental conditions. Summer cooking emphasized fresh foods and preservation techniques for winter storage. Winter cooking focused on maximizing calories and nutrition from stored foods while conserving fuel and maintaining warming fires. As the last pieces of mammoth meat finish roasting over the glowing coals and families gather to share their communal meal, we witness more than simple sustenance. We see the foundation of human civilization itself. The ability to transform raw materials into concentrated nutrition through controlled use of fire represents the technological mastery that enabled our ancestors to thrive in environments that would have been impossible to survive using only raw foods. The successful mammoth hunt has ended. The meat has been cooked and shared. But the true value of this 7-ton giant extends far beyond the thousands of pounds of nourishing food. As experienced craftsmen begin the careful process of transforming hide, bone, tusks, and sinew into the tools and clothing that will sustain life through another brutal winter, we witness the remarkable efficiency with which Ice Age cavemen utilized every part of their precious prey. The massive mammoth hide, measuring nearly 200 square feet and weighing over 400 pounds, represents enough material to clothe an entire family or provide covering for a substantial shelter. But before this tough, hair-covered skin can serve any useful purpose, it must undergo a complex transformation process that will test the skills and patience of the most experienced hide workers in the tribe. Archaeological evidence from sites like Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic reveals the sophisticated leatherworking techniques employed by Ice Age peoples. Bone needles found at this 30,000-year-old site show evidence of advanced sewing techniques, while microscopic analysis of preserved hide fragments indicates complex tanning processes that created leather as supple and durable as anything produced by modern methods. The initial preparation of mammoth hide began with the painstaking removal of fat and flesh using curved stone scrapers designed specifically for this purpose. Every trace of tissue had to be eliminated to prevent rot and ensure proper tanning. This work required days of intensive labor by multiple individuals, as the sheer size of mammoth hides made them impossible for single workers to handle effectively. Brain tanning represented the most sophisticated leather-making technique available to Ice Age craftsmen, utilizing enzymes naturally present in animal brains to break down proteins and create supple, waterproof leather. The brains of the hunted mammoth itself provided enough tanning material to process the entire hide, demonstrating the elegant efficiency of traditional hunting cultures that wasted nothing. The smoking process that followed brain tanning served both preservation and aesthetic purposes, creating leather that would resist moisture and insects while developing the distinctive coloration that indicated quality workmanship. Specialized smoking racks were constructed to hold large pieces of hide over smoldering fires, fueled with aromatic woods that imparted specific colors and scents to the finished leather. Sewing techniques using bone needles and sinew thread allowed craftsmen to create garments that fit closely to the body while providing maximum insulation and freedom of movement. The sinew from mammoth tendons provided thread stronger than any plant fiber, capable of holding together under the stresses of active hunting and the extreme temperature variations of Ice Age life. The design of mammoth hide clothing reflected deep understanding of cold weather physiology and the principles of layered insulation. Inner garments made from soft, thin leather provided protection against the skin while wicking moisture away from the body. Outer garments used thicker hide with the hair left on for maximum warmth, while specialized pieces like hoods and mittens protected vulnerable extremities from frostbite. Footwear construction represented one of the most challenging aspects of hide working, as feet required protection that was both waterproof and flexible enough to allow natural movement over rough terrain. Mammoth hide boots were constructed using multiple layers of leather and fur, with specialized sole pieces that provided traction on ice while insulating feet from frozen ground. Tool making from mammoth bones required understanding of bone structure and the mechanical properties of different skeletal elements. The massive leg bones provided material for heavy-duty tools like hammers and anvils, while ribs and vertebrae were shaped into specialized implements for hide scraping, food processing, and construction work. Tusk carving represented the highest level of artistic and technical achievement available to Ice Age craftsmen. Mammoth tusks, composed of dense ivory harder than bone but softer than stone, could be shaped into tools of incredible precision and beauty. Spear points, needle cases, and ceremonial objects carved from mammoth ivory demonstrate skill levels that rival those of modern artisans. The creation of composite tools using multiple materials from a single mammoth kill demonstrates the integration of different craft techniques within hunting cultures. A spear might combine an ivory point, wooden shaft, sinew binding, and hide grip wrapping, each element optimized for its specific function while contributing to the overall effectiveness of the weapon. Cutting and shaping tools made from mammoth bone were essential for processing the enormous amount of material generated by each successful hunt. Sharp-edged bone knives could slice through hide and flesh with precision, while broader scrapers removed fat and tissue from hides during preparation for tanning. Storage containers fashioned from mammoth parts provided essential equipment for preserving and organizing the resources generated by successful hunts. The stomach and bladder could be cleaned and treated to create waterproof containers for liquids, while sections of hide could be sewn into bags and pouches for storing tools, food, and personal possessions. Construction materials derived from mammoth kills enabled the building of substantial shelters that could house entire families through the winter months. The massive bones provided structural frameworks strong enough to support hide coverings, while smaller bones served as stakes, pins, and connecting elements that held these structures together. Archaeological evidence from sites like Mezherik in Ukraine shows mammoth bone houses that were used repeatedly over generations. Decorative elements created from mammoth materials served both aesthetic and social functions within Ice Age communities. Carved ivory ornaments indicated the status of successful hunters, while decorated clothing items marked important social positions or ceremonial roles. These artistic expressions demonstrate that even in harsh survival conditions, humans maintained cultural traditions that went beyond mere subsistence. The specialization of craft workers within hunting communities created some of humanity's first professional trades. Master hide workers, bone carvers, and tool makers developed skills that took years to acquire and represented valuable knowledge that was carefully guarded and passed down through apprenticeship systems. These specialists often enjoyed high status within their communities due to their essential contributions to survival. Quality control in tool and clothing manufacture was essential for ensuring that items would perform reliably under extreme conditions. Defective tools could fail at critical moments during hunts, while poorly made clothing could result in frostbite or death during winter storms. Master craftsmen developed testing procedures and quality standards that ensured their products would meet the demanding requirements of Ice Age life. Resource allocation for craft activities required careful balancing of immediate needs against long-term requirements. Limited materials had to be distributed among competing uses: food, tools, clothing, shelter, and ceremonial objects. These decisions often determined which individuals and families would be best equipped to survive the challenges of another winter. Innovation in tool and clothing design occurred continuously as craftsmen experimented with new techniques and adapted to changing environmental conditions. Successful innovations were quickly adopted by other community members, while failed experiments provided learning opportunities that informed future attempts. The trading of manufactured goods between different hunting groups created networks of exchange that spread innovations and provided access to materials not available locally. High-quality mammoth ivory tools and clothing items were valuable trade goods that could be exchanged for obsidian blades, amber ornaments, or other specialized products from distant regions. Repair and maintenance of tools and clothing was as important as their initial manufacture, as the harsh conditions of Ice Age life quickly damaged even the best-made items. Skilled craftsmen could extend the useful life of valuable items through careful repair work, often rebuilding tools and garments multiple times before the materials were finally exhausted. Seasonal variations in craft activities reflected the availability of materials and the urgency of different needs. Summer months were often devoted to processing hides and manufacturing clothing for winter, while winter periods focused on tool repair and the creation of items needed for spring hunting activities. The psychological and spiritual dimensions of craft work created meaningful connections between makers and their products. Tools and clothing items were often considered to possess spiritual qualities derived from the animals that provided their materials. This relationship added depth and meaning to the practical work of survival. As master craftsmen put the finishing touches on mammoth hide parkas that will keep hunters warm during the next winter's hunts, and ivory spear points that will bring down future prey, we see the complete cycle of sustainable hunting that characterized Ice Age life. Nothing was wasted, everything had purpose, and the death of one mammoth enabled the survival of an entire human community through its generous provision of all the materials needed for life in the frozen world. Deep within the painted caves of Lascaux, flickering torchlight illuminates images that are 20,000 years old. Massive bulls with flowing manes, herds of horses thundering across stone walls, and mammoths so lifelike they seem to breathe in the dancing shadows. But these are not mere decorations or casual artistic expressions. They are sacred records of the hunt, spiritual maps of the relationship between humans and the animals they pursued, and ritual preparations for the life and death encounters that would determine tribal survival. The spiritual dimensions of Ice Age hunting extended far beyond the practical necessities of obtaining food and materials. For cavemen who lived intimately with the animals they hunted, these creatures possessed souls, spirits, and supernatural powers that demanded respect, appeasement, and careful ritual attention. The success or failure of hunts was believed to depend as much on proper spiritual preparation as on hunting skills and weapons. Archaeological evidence from sites across Europe reveals the elaborate ritual systems that surrounded Ice Age hunting activities. At locations like Mezhmyskaya Cave in Russia, archaeologists have uncovered ceremonial hearths positioned away from everyday cooking fires, surrounded by carved animal figurines and decorated with ochre pigments that suggest spiritual rather than practical purposes. Pre-hunt ceremonies served to prepare hunters mentally and spiritually for the dangers they would face and to request assistance from the animal spirits that controlled the success of hunting ventures. These rituals often involved fasting, purification procedures, and the application of ceremonial paints and decorations that marked participants as engaged in sacred rather than ordinary activities. Cave paintings like those found at Chauvet, Lascaux, and Altamira represent some of humanity's earliest and most sophisticated artistic achievements, but they were far more than aesthetic expressions. These underground galleries served as temples where hunting magic was performed, animal spirits were consulted, and the cosmic relationships between humans and prey were maintained through ritual action. The selection of animals depicted in cave art was not random, but reflected the spiritual significance of different species within hunting cultures. Mammoths, bison, horses, and reindeer appear repeatedly in cave paintings, often shown in dynamic hunting scenes or surrounded by symbolic markings that suggest magical rather than representational purposes. Shamanic practices among Ice Age hunting groups likely included individuals who specialized in communicating with animal spirits and conducting the rituals necessary for hunting success. These spiritual specialists would have possessed detailed knowledge of animal behavior, migration patterns, and seasonal cycles that was presented as supernatural revelation rather than empirical observation. The use of ochre and other pigments in hunting rituals served both decorative and spiritual functions. Red ochre in particular was associated with blood, life force, and the spiritual connection between hunters and prey. Archaeological sites across the world show evidence of ochre use in hunting contexts, suggesting that this practice was widespread among Ice Age peoples. Animal figurines carved from mammoth ivory, bone, and stone served as focal points for hunting rituals and may have been believed to contain the spirits of specific animals or species. These objects were often carefully crafted with attention to anatomical detail that suggests they were intended to serve as supernatural representations rather than mere artistic expressions. The Venus figurines found at Ice Age sites across Europe may have been connected to hunting magic, representing fertility goddesses who controlled the reproduction of game animals. These female figures, with their exaggerated sexual characteristics, could have been invoked to ensure that animal populations remained abundant enough to support human hunting activities. Post-hunt rituals served to honor the spirits of killed animals and to maintain the spiritual relationships that made future hunting possible. These ceremonies often involved the careful treatment of animal bones, skulls, and other remains according to specific protocols designed to please animal spirits and encourage them to provide future opportunities for successful hunts. The arrangement of animal bones at archaeological sites often shows evidence of ritualistic rather than random disposal patterns. Mammoth skulls arranged in circles, cave bear bones deposited in specific cave locations, and the careful burial of hunting tools with animal remains all suggest complex spiritual beliefs about the afterlife of hunted animals. Seasonal hunting ceremonies were timed to coincide with animal migration patterns, breeding cycles, and other natural events that were believed to be controlled by supernatural forces. These rituals often involved entire communities and served to reinforce social bonds while preparing groups for the cooperative activities that hunting required. The symbolic transformation of hunters through ritual preparation often involved the wearing of animal masks, the application of ceremonial paints, and the performance of dances that imitated animal movements and behaviors. These activities were believed to give hunters supernatural abilities to track, approach, and kill their prey. Hunting magic often involved the creation of symbolic representations of successful hunts before the actual hunting took place. Cave paintings depicting speared animals, carved scenes of hunters pursuing prey, and ritual performances of hunting activities were all believed to influence the outcomes of real hunting expeditions. The relationship between hunting success and spiritual purity was central to many Ice Age ritual systems. Hunters who violated taboos, failed to perform proper ceremonies, or disrespected animal spirits were believed to be cursed with hunting failure that could doom entire communities to starvation. Divination practices may have been used to determine the timing and targets of hunting expeditions. The interpretation of dreams, the observation of animal behavior, and the reading of natural signs were all believed to provide supernatural guidance about when and where to hunt for maximum success. The prohibition systems that governed hunting activities created complex rules about which animals could be hunted at specific times, which hunters were permitted to participate in certain types of hunts, and how the spiritual relationships between humans and prey should be maintained. Initiation rituals for young hunters involved spiritual preparation as well as practical training. These ceremonies marked the transition from childhood to adulthood and included instruction in the sacred as well as practical aspects of hunting. Young men were taught not just how to track and kill animals, but how to relate to them spiritually. The commemoration of great hunts through art, storytelling, and ritual reenactment served to preserve the memory of successful hunting strategies while reinforcing the spiritual beliefs that supported hunting culture. These activities transformed individual hunting experiences into collective cultural knowledge. Sacred hunting grounds were recognized by many Ice Age groups as locations where the spiritual connections between humans and animals were particularly strong. These areas were often protected by taboos and restrictions that regulated access and hunting activities according to spiritual rather than practical considerations. The integration of hunting rituals with astronomical observations created calendrical systems that coordinated hunting activities with seasonal changes and natural cycles. The timing of ceremonies, migrations, and hunting expeditions was often based on observations of star positions, moon phases, and solar movements. Ancestral hunter spirits were believed to continue influencing hunting success from beyond death, creating obligations to honor deceased hunters and maintain their ritual traditions. Burial practices often included hunting weapons and tools that would be needed in the afterlife, while ongoing ceremonies invoked ancestral assistance for living hunters. The transformation of successful hunters into legendary figures created mythological systems that preserved hunting knowledge while investing it with supernatural significance. Stories about great hunters who possessed magical abilities served as both entertainment and instruction, encoding practical hunting knowledge within spiritual narratives. As the torchlight fades and the painted animals retreat into darkness once again, we understand that Ice Age hunting was never simply about killing animals for food. It was a sacred relationship that connected humans to the natural world through bonds of respect, reciprocity, and spiritual obligation that transformed necessary violence into meaningful sacrifice and made survival possible in the harshest conditions on Earth. The young boy crouches silently beside his grandfather in the early morning frost, his small hands gripping a child-sized spear as they watch a herd of reindeer moving slowly across the distant tundra. At 8 years old, He has been accompanying hunting parties for 2 winters, learning to read tracks, understand wind patterns, and most importantly, to remain absolutely still for hours at a time while experienced hunters plan their approach. Today, for the first time, he will be allowed to participate in an actual hunt rather than simply observe from a safe distance. The education of young hunters in Ice Age societies was not a casual process, but a systematic program of instruction that began in early childhood and continued until young men could demonstrate mastery of all the skills necessary for survival. This training was literally a matter of life and death, as poorly prepared hunters could not only fail to contribute to tribal survival, but could also endanger others through their mistakes and inexperience. Archaeological evidence from sites like Malta in Siberia reveals sophisticated tool-making traditions that were clearly passed down through generations of specialized instruction. Miniature weapons found at this 24,000-year-old site suggest that children learned hunting skills using scaled-down versions of adult tools, allowing them to develop proper techniques without the dangers associated with full-sized weapons. The earliest stages of hunting education began before children could even walk, as infants were carried on hunting expeditions and exposed to the sights, sounds, and smells of the hunt from birth. This early exposure created familiarity with hunting environments that would serve as the foundation for later formal instruction in tracking, weapon use, and animal behavior. Observation training formed the cornerstone of hunting education, as young children spent countless hours watching experienced hunters demonstrate tracking techniques, weapon handling, and strategic planning. These observation periods were not passive, but involved constant questioning and explanation as elders shared the accumulated wisdom of generations of successful hunters. The development of physical skills began with simple exercises designed to build the strength, endurance, and coordination necessary for hunting activities. Children practiced throwing stones at targets to develop accuracy, engaged in running and climbing activities to build cardiovascular fitness, and performed strengthening exercises using weighted objects to develop the muscle power needed to handle hunting weapons. Weapon training followed a carefully structured progression from simple to complex tools and techniques. Children began with blunt practice spears that could not cause serious injuries, progressing through various stages of complexity until they could handle full-sized weapons with confidence and skill. This training often took years to complete and required constant supervision to prevent accidents. Tracking instruction involved teaching children to read the subtle signs that revealed animal presence, movement patterns, and behavioral states. Young students learned to identify different types of tracks, interpret feeding signs, analyze scat for information about animal health and diet, and follow trails across various types of terrain and weather conditions. Animal behavior education was essential for developing the understanding of prey psychology that made successful hunting possible. Children learned about feeding patterns, migration routes, social structures, and the seasonal changes that affected animal vulnerability. This knowledge was often encoded in stories and songs that made complex information easier to remember. Stealth and camouflage techniques were taught through games and exercises that developed the ability to move silently, remain motionless for extended periods, and blend invisibly with natural surroundings. These skills were essential for approaching wary prey animals and avoiding detection by dangerous predators that might threaten hunting parties. Group coordination training taught young hunters how to function effectively as part of hunting teams, understanding their roles in complex operations, and responding appropriately to signals and commands from hunt leaders. This training emphasized discipline, teamwork, and the subordination of individual desires to group objectives. The learning of hunting protocols included instruction in the social and spiritual dimensions of hunting activities. Young hunters learned about meat-sharing customs, ritual obligations, and the ethical guidelines that governed relationships between humans and prey animals. This cultural education was considered as important as technical skill development. Storytelling traditions served as primary vehicles for transmitting hunting knowledge across generations. Evening gatherings around fires provided opportunities for experienced hunters to recount significant hunts, describing techniques, strategies, and lessons learned in vivid narratives that made abstract knowledge concrete and memorable. Apprenticeship systems paired young hunters with experienced mentors who took personal responsibility for their training and development. These relationships often lasted for years and created strong bonds between teachers and students that continued throughout life. Master hunters took pride in the achievements of their apprentices and were held accountable for their failures. Graduated responsibility allowed young hunters to take on increasingly important roles as their skills and experience developed. Beginning as observers and messengers, they progressed through stages of participation that culminated in full membership in hunting parties with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. Testing and evaluation procedures determined when young hunters had developed sufficient skills to advance to the next level of training or to participate in increasingly dangerous hunting activities. These assessments often took the form of practical challenges that required demonstration of specific skills under realistic conditions. Cultural transmission extended beyond hunting techniques to include the spiritual beliefs, social customs, and moral values that governed hunting behavior. Young hunters learned not just how to kill animals, but how to relate to them respectfully and how to fulfill their obligations to their communities and the natural world. The role of women in hunting education varied among different Ice Age groups, but many societies included women in tracking instruction, tool-making education, and the teaching of animal behavior. Women's knowledge of plant foods, seasonal cycles, and resource management was essential for comprehensive survival education. Seasonal training programs took advantage of different times of year to teach specific skills and knowledge. Spring training focused on tracking and animal behavior during breeding seasons. Summer training emphasized tool making and resource processing. Fall training concentrated on hunting techniques and winter preparation. Memory techniques were essential for preserving hunting knowledge in societies without written language. Young hunters learned mnemonic devices, songs, and ritual practices that encoded complex information in forms that could be accurately transmitted across generations without loss or distortion. Error correction and safety protocols were crucial components of hunting education, as mistakes during training could be as dangerous as mistakes during actual hunts. Experienced instructors learned to identify common errors, correct them before they became habits, and ensure that safety procedures were followed rigorously during all training activities. Innovation and adaptation were encouraged within traditional teaching frameworks as young hunters who demonstrated creativity and problem-solving abilities were valued for their potential contributions to hunting effectiveness. The best students were those who could master traditional techniques while also developing new approaches to hunting challenges. Individual assessment recognized that different students had different strengths and weaknesses that suited them for different roles within hunting teams. Some excelled at tracking, others at weapon use, still others at strategic planning. Effective education systems identified these differences and channeled students toward specializations that maximized their contributions. Peer learning occurred naturally as young hunters of similar ages worked together, shared knowledge, and learned from each other's successes and failures. These relationships often continued throughout life and formed the basis for hunting partnerships that could last for decades. The completion of hunting education was often marked by ceremonial recognition of a young man's transition to full adult status within the tribe. These coming-of-age rituals included demonstrations of hunting skills, spiritual initiation, and formal acceptance of adult responsibilities and privileges. As our young apprentice finally receives permission to throw his small spear at a wounded reindeer, missing his target but learning crucial lessons about range, wind compensation, and target selection, we witness the continuation of educational traditions that enabled Ice Age peoples to pass their survival knowledge successfully from generation to generation, ensuring that the skills needed to thrive in the frozen world would never be lost. The hunting party returns to camp at sunset, but they are carrying more than the successful kill of a reindeer bull. Two men support their injured companion between them, his leg twisted at an unnatural angle where the fleeing animal's antlers caught him during the final moments of the hunt. Blood seeps through the makeshift bandages wrapped around deep gashes in his thigh, and his face is pale with shock and pain. This is the harsh reality of Ice Age hunting. Every expedition into the frozen wilderness carried the real possibility of injury, disability, or death. Archaeological evidence from Paleolithic sites across Europe tells a sobering story of the physical toll that hunting took on Ice Age peoples. Human skeletal remains from this period show injury patterns that are unmistakable signatures of hunting accidents. Fractured ribs from mammoth tusks, crushed vertebrae from falls during pursuit of prey, and healed bone breaks that indicate severe trauma survived through primitive medical treatment and remarkable human resilience. The Shanidar cave site in Iraq provides particularly compelling evidence of hunting injuries and their consequences for Ice Age communities. The remains of Shanidar I, a Neanderthal man who died around 45,000 years ago, show extensive injuries, including a crushed skull, a withered arm, and evidence of blindness in one eye. Despite these severe disabilities, this individual lived for many years after his injuries, suggesting that his community cared for him and valued his contributions even when he could no longer hunt. Mammoth hunting represented the most dangerous activity undertaken by Ice Age peoples, with injury and death rates that modern safety experts would consider completely unacceptable. A single mammoth bull could weigh up to 14,000 pounds and possess tusks capable of impaling multiple hunters with a single sweep of his massive head. Archaeological evidence from mammoth kill sites often includes human remains that show clear signs of traumatic death during hunting activities. The types of injuries sustained during hunting reflected the specific dangers posed by different prey animals. Cave bear attacks typically caused massive crushing injuries to the head and torso, while wolf pack encounters resulted in multiple bite wounds and tissue damage. Bison and aurochs hunting led to goring injuries from sharp horns, while falls during horse and reindeer hunts caused broken bones and head trauma. Spear wounds from hunting accidents were unfortunately common, as the chaos of group hunts created numerous opportunities for friendly fire incidents. Stone-tipped spears could cause devastating injuries even when thrown by fellow hunters, and the excitement and confusion of successful hunts sometimes led to tragic mistakes when multiple hunters converged on wounded prey animals. Environmental hazards during hunting expeditions posed additional risks that could disable or kill hunters even when no dangerous animals were encountered. Frozen rivers concealed deadly thin ice that could plunge hunters into frigid water, while hidden crevasses in glaciated terrain could trap individuals beyond rescue. Sudden weather changes could strand hunting parties in conditions that would claim lives within hours. The treatment of hunting injuries required medical knowledge and techniques that represented some of humanity's earliest healthcare systems. Bone-setting procedures used wooden splints and plant fiber bindings to immobilize fractures, while wound care involved cleaning with water, applying plant-based antiseptics, and creating protective bandages from animal hide and fur. Herbal medicine played a crucial role in treating hunting injuries, as Ice Age peoples developed extensive knowledge of plants that could reduce pain, prevent infection, and promote healing. Archaeological evidence from sites like Shanidar Cave suggests that Neanderthals were using medicinal plants as early as 60,000 years ago, including species still used by modern herbalists. for treating trauma injuries. The psychological impact of hunting injuries extended far beyond the immediate physical damage, as disabled hunters often faced social challenges and reduced status within their communities. However, evidence from burial sites suggests that many injured hunters continued to receive care and respect, indicating that Ice Age societies valued individuals for more than just their hunting abilities. Infection represented one of the greatest threats following hunting injuries, as contaminated weapons and exposure to animal blood and saliva could introduce deadly bacteria into wound sites. Without modern antibiotics, hunters relied on plant medicines, careful wound cleaning, and immune system responses to fight off potentially fatal infections. Prey animal diseases posed additional health risks for hunters who came into contact with infected carcasses during butchering and processing activities. Anthrax, tuberculosis, and other zoonotic diseases could be transmitted from animals to humans, creating health crises that could devastate entire hunting communities if proper precautions were not observed. The social costs of hunting injuries included the loss of productive labor, the burden of caring for disabled individuals, and the psychological trauma experienced by survivors of hunting accidents. These costs had to be balanced against the benefits of hunting success, creating complex risk-benefit calculations that influenced hunting strategies and target selection. Adaptation strategies for dealing with hunting injuries included the development of alternative roles for disabled hunters who could no longer participate in dangerous activities. Experienced hunters who suffered permanent injuries often became instructors, tool makers, or spiritual advisors whose knowledge remained valuable even when their physical capabilities were compromised. Group support systems provided care for injured hunters and their families during recovery periods that could last for months or years. Food sharing, shelter assistance, and protection services ensured that hunting injuries did not automatically result in death or abandonment, creating social safety nets that enhanced overall community survival. The training modifications that resulted from hunting accidents led to improved safety procedures and risk reduction strategies that lowered injury rates over time. Painful experience with specific types of accidents led to changes in hunting techniques, weapon designs, and group coordination procedures that made dangerous activities somewhat safer. Seasonal variations in hunting risks reflected changing environmental conditions and animal behaviors that affected the likelihood of accidents and injuries. Winter hunting was particularly dangerous due to reduced visibility, treacherous footing, and the increased desperation of both hunters and prey animals struggling to survive in harsh conditions. Age-related hunting risks created different vulnerability patterns among hunters of various experience levels. Young hunters faced higher accident rates due to inexperience and poor judgment, while older hunters were more susceptible to injuries due to reduced reflexes and physical capabilities that had been diminished by years of hunting activities. Tool failure during hunting activities could transform routine expeditions into life-threatening emergencies. Broken spear points, snapped handles, and failed bindings left hunters defenseless against dangerous prey animals or unable to complete kills that had already been initiated, creating situations where injuries and deaths became almost inevitable. Emergency response procedures for hunting accidents included systems for rapid evacuation of injured hunters, immediate medical treatment in field conditions, and communication methods for summoning help when hunting parties encountered difficulties. These procedures required advanced planning and training that could mean the difference between life and death. Long-term consequences of hunting injuries included permanent disabilities that affected not only individual hunters, but also their families and communities for generations. Children of disabled hunters often faced reduced opportunities and status, while communities bore the ongoing costs of supporting individuals who could no longer contribute fully to survival activities. Risk assessment techniques developed by experienced hunters allowed for better evaluation of hunting opportunities and the selection of strategies that balanced potential rewards against likely dangers. These assessment skills were crucial survival knowledge that was carefully transmitted to younger generations through instruction and example. Burial practices for hunters killed during hunting activities often included the placement of weapons and hunting gear with the deceased, suggesting beliefs about afterlife hunting or the spiritual significance of death during the pursuit of prey. These practices also served to honor hunters who had died in service to their communities. Memorial traditions preserved the memory of hunters who had been killed or severely injured during hunting activities, serving both to honor their sacrifices and to provide instruction about the specific dangers they had encountered. These traditions helped maintain awareness of hunting risks while celebrating the courage required to face them. Prevention strategies that emerged from accumulated experience with hunting injuries included improvements in weapons technology, refinements in hunting techniques, and the development of protective equipment that reduced the likelihood of accidents. However, the fundamental dangers of hunting large, powerful animals could never be completely eliminated. As the injured hunter is carefully carried into the cave where healers wait with medicinal plants and bone-setting tools, surrounded by family members whose own scars tell similar stories of survival and loss, we understand that the price of Ice Age hunting success was paid not just in skill and courage, but in broken bones, permanent disabilities, and lives cut short by. As the last strips of mammoth meat are hung on drying racks and the massive bones are sorted for tool making, the successful completion of this butchering operation represents far more than simple food processing. It demonstrates the sophisticated knowledge, social cooperation, and technical skills that enabled Ice Age cavemen to transform dangerous hunting into sustainable survival systems that supported entire communities through the harshest conditions on Earth. The last mammoth has fallen, its massive form still and silent in the early morning light as the final echoes of the Ice Age fade into the warming air of a changing world. Across the grasslands that once rang with the thunderous footsteps of giant herds, new sounds emerge: the lowing of cattle, the bleating of sheep, and the voices of humans who no longer chase their prey across endless miles but tend animals in carefully managed fields and pastures. The transformation from hunting to herding represents one of the most profound changes in human history, but it was built upon foundations laid by countless generations of Ice Age hunters who developed the skills, knowledge, and social structures that would make civilization possible. The cooperative abilities that enabled 20 hunters to bring down a mammoth would later allow thousands of people to work together in cities. The planning skills required for seasonal hunts would evolve into agricultural calendars and trade networks spanning continents. Archaeological evidence from sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, built around 11,500 years ago, shows the transitional period when hunting cultures were beginning to experiment with permanent settlements and domesticated animals. The massive stone circles at this site were constructed by hunter-gatherers who were already beginning to develop the organizational abilities that would soon revolutionize human society. The domestication of animals began with the same careful observation of animal behavior that had made Ice Age hunting successful. Hunters who understood migration patterns, feeding habits, and social structures were ideally positioned to recognize which species could be managed rather than merely pursued. The wolf packs that had once competed with humans for prey became the first domesticated dogs, while wild horses, cattle, and sheep gradually transformed into the foundation of pastoral societies. Genetic studies of modern domestic animals reveal the profound impact that Ice Age hunters had on the species they pursued. The selective pressure of human hunting eliminated certain bloodlines while favoring others, creating evolutionary changes that persisted long after hunting ended. Modern cattle, sheep, and pigs all bear the genetic signatures of their interactions with Ice Age hunting peoples. The technologies developed for hunting found new applications in herding and agriculture. Spear points became plowshares. Animal enclosures evolved from hunting drive systems, and the leather-working techniques that created hunting clothing adapted to produce harnesses and containers for agricultural societies. The tool-making traditions that had sustained hunters for hundreds of thousands of years provided the foundation for metallurgy and craftsmanship. Social hierarchies that had emerged from hunting leadership evolved into the class systems that characterized agricultural societies. Successful hunt leaders became tribal chiefs, master tool makers became craft specialists, and the sharing protocols that governed meat distribution became the basis for taxation and tribute systems that supported growing populations. Knowledge systems developed by hunters laid the groundwork for formal education and written language. The need to preserve hunting techniques, animal behavior information, and seasonal calendars drove the development of memory techniques, symbolic representation, and eventually written records that could transmit complex information across time and space. Trading networks that had allowed hunting groups to exchange resources and information evolved into the commercial systems that connected agricultural societies across vast distances. The routes that had once carried hunting expeditions following migrating herds became trade roads linking cities and civilizations. Religious and spiritual systems that had emerged from hunting cultures profoundly influenced the development of organized religions in agricultural societies. The animal spirits that hunters had worshipped became the gods and goddesses of agricultural peoples, while hunting rituals evolved into religious ceremonies that continued to honor the natural world even as humans gained increasing control over it. Artistic traditions that began with cave paintings of hunting scenes evolved into the sophisticated art forms that decorated temples, palaces, and public spaces in later civilizations. The careful observation of animal anatomy and behavior that made hunters successful provided the foundation for realistic artistic representation that characterized many ancient cultures. Medical knowledge developed by hunting peoples dealing with injuries and trauma became the basis for formal healthcare systems. The herbal medicines, bone-setting techniques, and surgical procedures that had treated hunting accidents evolved into medical traditions that were practiced by specialized healers in agricultural societies. Geographic knowledge accumulated by hunting peoples following migrating herds provided the foundation for exploration and navigation that enabled the expansion of agricultural societies into new territories. The mental maps that had guided hunters across Ice Age landscapes became the basis for formal cartography and geographical sciences. Environmental management techniques developed by hunters evolved into the agricultural practices that transformed natural ecosystems into managed landscapes. The controlled burning that had once managed hunting grounds became slash-and-burn agriculture, while knowledge of plant and animal cycles provided the foundation for crop rotation and seasonal farming. Military technologies and strategies derived from hunting techniques shaped the development of warfare in agricultural societies. The coordination required for mammoth hunts provided models for battlefield tactics, while hunting weapons evolved into military equipment that determined the outcomes of conflicts between competing civilizations. Urban planning concepts can be traced back to the camp organization systems developed by hunting peoples. The need to organize space for different activities, manage waste disposal, and coordinate group movements led to principles of community design that influenced the layout of villages, towns, and eventually cities. Legal systems that governed resource distribution and conflict resolution in hunting societies provided precedents for the formal laws that maintained order in agricultural communities. The concepts of property rights, inheritance, and justice that emerged from hunting cultures formed the basis for legal codes that governed increasingly complex societies. Scientific thinking that began with hunters carefully observing animal behavior and environmental patterns evolved into systematic approaches to understanding the natural world. The experimental methods that hunters used to improve their techniques became the foundation for scientific investigation that would eventually unlock the secrets of physics, chemistry, and biology. Technological innovation that had been driven by hunting necessity continued to accelerate in agricultural societies as growing populations created new challenges and opportunities. The same creative problem solving that had enabled hunters to bring down giant prey with stone-tipped spears eventually produced the technologies that built pyramids, created writing systems, and launched humans into space. Cultural transmission systems that had preserved hunting knowledge across generations adapted to serve the needs of increasingly complex societies. The storytelling traditions that had taught hunting skills became literature, while apprenticeship systems evolved into formal schools and universities that could educate specialists in multiple fields. Population growth that became possible with agricultural surplus was enabled by the cooperative skills that hunting peoples had developed over hundreds of thousands of years. The ability to work together toward common goals, share resources fairly, and resolve conflicts peacefully had been essential for hunting success and remained crucial for managing larger and more complex communities. International cooperation that began with agreements between hunting groups about territorial boundaries and resource sharing evolved into diplomatic systems that allowed agricultural societies to coexist and trade with each other. The negotiation skills that had prevented conflicts over hunting grounds became the foundation for treaties and alliances between nations. The psychological adaptations that had enabled hunters to face dangerous prey with courage and determination continued to influence human behavior in agricultural societies. The willingness to take calculated risks, the ability to work under pressure, and the capacity for long-term planning that had made hunting successful remained valuable traits in farmers, craftsmen, and leaders. Modern genetics research has revealed that many of the physical and mental traits that made Ice Age hunters successful continue to influence human capabilities today. The endurance that enabled persistence hunting, the hand-eye coordination that made accurate spear throwing possible, and the spatial intelligence that allowed navigation across featureless landscapes all remain part of human biological heritage. The emotional intelligence that developed through hunting partnerships created the foundation for complex human relationships and social institutions. The empathy required to understand both human teammates and animal prey, the patience needed for long-term planning, and the emotional resilience necessary to face constant danger all became permanent features of human psychology that would prove essential for building complex societies. Educational systems that began with hunting apprenticeships evolved into formal institutions of learning that could preserve and transmit increasingly complex knowledge. The one-on-one mentoring relationships between master hunters and apprentices became the model for teacher-student relationships that would eventually produce universities, academies, and research institutions capable of advancing human understanding across all fields of knowledge. Gender roles and social organization patterns that emerged from hunting societies influenced family structures and social hierarchies for thousands of years. The division of labor that had proven effective for hunting groups provided templates for organizing work in agricultural and industrial societies, while the leadership qualities developed through hunting continued to influence political and organizational structures. Communication systems that had evolved to coordinate complex hunts became the foundation for increasingly sophisticated languages capable of expressing abstract concepts. preserving historical knowledge and facilitating trade and diplomacy between distant peoples. The precise vocabulary needed to describe animal behavior, hunting techniques, and tool construction provided the linguistic building blocks for technical and scientific communication. Ethical frameworks that governed hunting behavior, concepts of fair play, resource sharing, and respect for opponents evolved into moral and legal systems that regulated behavior in agricultural societies. The codes of conduct that had prevented conflicts within hunting groups became the basis for laws, customs, and social norms that maintained order in growing communities. Economic principles that had emerged from hunting societies provided the foundation for trade, currency, and market systems that would eventually span continents. The concepts of value, exchange, and resource allocation that had been essential for managing hunting success became the basic principles of economic organization that enabled complex civilizations to flourish. Navigation and geographical knowledge accumulated by hunting peoples following migrating herds across vast territories provided the foundation for exploration, mapping, and the eventual discovery of new continents. The spatial memory and directional skills that had enabled hunters to find their way across featureless landscapes became the basis for maritime navigation and cartographic science. Architectural principles derived from hunting camp organization and shelter construction influenced the design of permanent settlements, cities, and monumental buildings. The understanding of structural engineering developed through mammoth bone house construction provided insights that would eventually enable the building of temples, pyramids, and other architectural marvels. Timekeeping and calendar systems that had coordinated hunting activities with seasonal changes became the foundation for agricultural planning, religious observances, and civil administration. The precise timing required for intercepting migrating herds translated into the astronomical observations and mathematical calculations that enabled accurate calendars and seasonal predictions. Conflict resolution mechanisms that had prevented disputes within hunting groups evolved into judicial systems and diplomatic protocols that enabled peaceful coexistence between competing societies. The negotiation skills and mediation techniques that had resolved hunting conflicts became the basis for legal procedures and international relations. Resource management strategies developed by hunting peoples for sustainable exploitation of animal populations provided early insights into conservation principles that would later be applied to forestry, fisheries, and other natural resources. The understanding that overhunting could lead to local extinctions became the foundation for environmental stewardship and sustainable development practices. Cultural preservation techniques that had maintained hunting traditions across generations provided models for preserving and transmitting other types of cultural knowledge. The storytelling, ritual practices, and apprenticeship systems that had kept hunting skills alive became the templates for preserving religious traditions, artistic techniques, and scholarly knowledge. Innovation processes that had driven improvements in hunting technology continued to fuel technological advancement in agricultural and industrial societies. The experimental mindset and problem-solving approaches that had enabled hunters to develop better weapons and techniques became the foundation for scientific research and technological development. Social mobility concepts that had allowed skilled hunters to rise in status regardless of birth provided early models for merit-based advancement that would eventually challenge hereditary class systems. The recognition that ability and contribution mattered more than ancestry became a persistent theme in human social evolution. As we stand at the end of this long journey through the frozen world of our Ice Age ancestors, watching the last hunting party return to a cave that will soon be abandoned for permanent settlements in the warming valleys below, we understand that we carry within ourselves the legacy of every successful hunt, every act of courage, and every innovation that enabled our species to survive the harshest conditions Earth has ever imposed upon humanity. The hunters may have laid down their spears, but their spirit lives on in every human endeavor that requires cooperation, courage, and the determination to face the unknown in pursuit of a better future. From the boardrooms of modern corporations to the laboratories where scientists push the boundaries of knowledge, from the emergency rooms where medical teams fight to save lives, to the classrooms where teachers inspire the next generation, the skills and values forged in the crucible of Ice Age hunting continue to shape who we are as a species. The mammoth hunt is over, but the human adventure is just beginning.